Don't you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love just for a little fun? I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear overnight, just to give into the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Wednesday, August 5th. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Baris. You can follow me right there at Peoples_Pundit on Twitter. Lots to talk about. Obviously, the election. We got a hearing with Sally Yates going on right now. And then at 2 p.m., we're going to launch a new show with Baris and Barnes, baby. Or Barnes and Baris, right? Which one's alphabetically first? And B&B. And we'll talk about election betting markets. We'll talk about the polls. We're really going to get in a lot of other stuff that we don't cover on Inside the Numbers. It's going to be really cool. All right. But I know I can see already the questions in the queue, but let me roll for a minute here. You know, it's like dealing with an alternative reality in a lot of ways. I think because we've become so political, some of the stuff people see me write or post on Twitter, everybody assumes or thinks like this is your opinion or something, you know, but it's not my opinion when I post like a voter file screenshot, you know, and then it's like they go run to these other like big media guys and other people from other websites. Oh, is that real? Is he telling you the truth? So I'm going to have to show you my screen. Look, there's a couple big stories out of last night. One, I think, some is good for Republicans, some is bad for Republicans, some is good for Democrats, some is bad for Democrats. And of course, the president, what that means for his reelection chances, right? First and foremost, in Missouri, we see the expansion of Medicaid, which is, something that's been a long-term trend. Democrats have done a good job saying, it's all or nothing. And this halfway approach it's odd how it works in practice with voters. So it ends up appealing to people that you would never think it appealed to. And even, 10 years ago would tell you that they oppose Obamacare, but that's the way it is. So I thought that was pretty big. Of course, Bush, that race, basically it reinforces two things. One, the leftward shift in the Democratic Party is absolutely real. It's being borne out in the House first. And it would have been borne out in the 2020 Democratic primary if there wasn't what was essentially an unprecedented push to get Joe Biden nominated. And how they did that was to convince the Democratic primary. If you look at the voter analysis, which replaced exit polls for most media organizations, the results are very clear. The heart was with Bernie. They believed in Bernie's agenda. Joe Biden was absolutely the moderate of the past. The Democratic Party does not, by majority, support what Joe Biden pretended to be his positions. Joe Biden is whatever the hell Joe Biden needs to be for the day. I mean, he doesn't have a position, right? At least Bernie Sanders, for the most part, he has his positions. They backed Bernie from state to state. What happened is that he got painted with the unelectability brush. And the media alliance, the Democrat establishment media alliance, convinced Democratic primary voters that Bernie Sanders could not win and would lose to Donald Trump. The most important issue for voters in the Democratic primary across the board was defeating Donald Trump. All right. So that is what happened. But even though we saw, somebody who's basically a corporatist Democrat get the nomination, down ballot, we're seeing this leftward shift. And again, Rashida Tlaib, like I said, pretty close, 23 to the final. It's going to turn out to be probably around 27, 30 points for Tlaib. Pretty close. What happened there? What I said yesterday. The vote that Brenda Jones really needed to be the electorate, it didn't pan out for her. So she needed older Black Democrats. The electorate was also whiter and younger, or at least the ballots that are, being counted. Clearly, I can tell. I don't even need to look at this point. I know from polling that race for weeks, Brenda Jones had a real chance there. But you need money to win, which brings me to north of that race that's Michigan 13. North of that race is Michigan 8. Look. I know a lot of you guys aren't going to want to hear this. And full disclosure, I know Mike Dittmer. I've met Mike Dittmer. We've worked together. He was the stronger candidate. So nominating Paul Young was a loser. And as of right now, Paul Young is going to lose to Alyssa Slotkin by 1 to 3 points. And it's really going to suck for Trump supporters. That's it. He needed that district. The vote in Livingston went to Mike. That's the biggest vote getter in Michigan 8. Paul won by essentially winning Oakland and Ingham County and relying on the blue areas that will go for Slotkin. And Oakland has gotten pink over the years, where it used to be very red. Oakland has gotten pink. And, look, and I know a lot of people, I can see the reaction already. People don't like to hear that. It is what it is, folks. Paul raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from his friends and families. Dittmer did not, is running a few points behind him. So he raised all that money to barely win. And he's going to need Dittmer's help to get that vote out in Livingston, because that is the only way for Republicans to take back Michigan 8. And you can see in the vote, they don't particularly like Paul. If Likes was not in that race, if Alan Hoover was not in that race, Dittmer would have crushed him. Clearly, he would have crushed him. So a guy who raises hundreds of thousands of dollars next to Dittmer, who was the second highest, would only, we're in the tens with Dittmer at that point, right? I didn't look at the last filing, but probably like 50. Let's call it 50, ballpark. And he can't beat Dittmer by a huge margin like that. And if you were to take the spoilers out of the race, Dittmer would have crushed him. That is the sign of a weak candidate. So Republicans nominated the more moderate, so-called moderate candidate, who, unfortunately for them, will pan out to be a lot like Mike Bishop. And as strong as he looked like he's going to be in Oakland, I'm not saying it's a shoo-in. I'm saying fundamentally, Mike Dittmer he was the stronger candidate for a Trump reelection. And Michigan 8 needs to go to Trump by around 7 points at least in order for Trump to carry that state. So it's bad news for Trump's reelection effort in Michigan. He's going to have to drag Paul Young over the finish line, as opposed to Mike Dittmer juicing turnout in Livingston to help Trump, and as working together up and down ballot. That is always the strongest of tickets. And in 2016, it was like all the political stars aligned for Donald Trump, and he drug everybody else over the finish line. But there were certain areas of the country where magic was happening, like in Ohio, where Rob Portman, was
making out more from the Trump coalition, that the Trump coalition was making out from him, because there are just these kinds of Republicans in and around Franklin County. They're not going to like somebody like Donald Trump. Yet at the same time, Donald Trump's going to peel a lot of that Democrat working class base in the southeastern part of the state, and that helped Rob Portman. They probably would have never have voted for Rob Portman. Somebody like a Rob Portman, those people don't like, but they like Donald Trump. So they decided, I'm going to help him in the Senate. So that's kind of how this works. Paul Young's a weaker candidate. That's it. I'm sorry. You come here to get the truth. You come here to get the real numbers. Speaking of which, let's go on over to Arizona, where unbelievably crap I got to deal with every day. This is the voter file. There is nobody that you could run to, okay? Your favorite pundit, whatever you want to call them. There is nobody you can run to, folks, that you can go and say, is Rich telling me the truth about this? Rich has the biggest, best voter file database in the country. I work with the best people in the country. If there's nobody you can run to try to verify that. If they don't have access to this, then they can't help you.
Not only that, but you need them to open up their...
Yeah, and that's another thing. That's right. Nobody has been more transparent than me, ever. Nobody has ever been willing to go on a podcast, slap up a live stream on YouTube, and tell you, this is the voter file. This isn't my opinion. This isn't what my polling shows. This is the voter file. Start with this as a baseline and draw your conclusions from there. In Arizona, what I saw off the bat, because if you go back to the Arizona voter analysis episode, 2 months ago now, go back to that. You will see I don't care what the polls are showing. If Joe Biden cannot beat Donald Trump in Maricopa County, Joe Biden is not going to win the state of Arizona. Sinema got very, very, very lucky in 2018. It was a D+10 national mood. Independents did something they almost never do before. By the way, independents in Maricopa County don't vote like independents in the rest of the state. All right. That's number 5 on this. That's not even number 2, right? It's number 5. The bottom line is Republicans did not flex their muscles as much as they could have. And they still didn't even last night, even though they outvoted Democrats. Democrat turnout was a little bit higher in Maricopa County than Republican turnout was. Yet, why are there more Republican votes than there are Democrats? Because this is the voter file, folks. I'm not making this crap up. All right, I'm going to X this out just so you can see. Arizona is checked here. You see this? What did I do, Laura? Did I create this giant database and this interactive thing? What alternative reality are you creating in your minds? You people are way down the damn rabbit hole, right? I'd be so brilliant. I'd be the most talented programmer. Start crawling out of the rabbit hole. You're way down it, man. Way down. You got to see the stuff I've gotten on Twitter. This was not an encouraging result for Democrats. Why? Why do you say? Because Maricopa County, the media, the media pundit class, whatever you want to call them, they have been saying Maricopa was trending Democrat. And I'm telling you that it was just that independents moved a little bit differently. They do that, surprisingly. They swing. They're independents, all right? They were moving a little bit differently, but underlying trends really are not favorable to Democrats. It's flat. It's flat, folks. They're making gains in the rest of the state. But in Maricopa, which will decide it, the only reason why Sinema won, and there's a few things that happened, is it is tradition. There is no state standardization of how to handle in-person early vote. There's no state law. It is tradition in Maricopa County. And the recorder there for years had done it like this. But then there was this new Democrat hack. It's just, sorry. And they allowed something that, 1, has never happened before, and 2, was very unfair. Tradition states in Maricopa County that the in-person early vote stops Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon, early Friday evening. And then that's it. You can't in-person vote until Tuesday, Election Day. Most of the ballots come in anyway by mail. 80% in Arizona is typical, very typical. Okay. Maricopa under the new Democrat supervisor of elections, everybody's got different names depending on where you are in the country. They allowed Democrats to vote in person early for 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Republicans had no idea. And Republican precincts were not doing the same. That, and according to the investigation from the law firm hired by the former chair of the Arizona GOP, they were dumpster diving and finding ballots for those 3 days, doing everything they possibly could to get extra votes for Sinema. It was barely enough. Barely. Trump carried Maricopa by 5 points in 2016. And I have been saying, if you look at the polling, you will see that Maricopa in these polls is essentially flat with party ID. Maricopa is not a flat party ID county. Maricopa has been R4, R5 for a while. Republicans have lost some of the women vote there, that whole McCain thing, that's part of it. But also, and that's not really the area where he was the strongest and had the most influence, but it still does matter. And then also they have not turned out like Democrats have turned out. So that will lopside the vote. And I am telling you, they have more muscle to flex there. They just need to focus on turning out those voters that that are more reluctant, like the less frequent voter. Okay. So turnout for Democrats was about 47%. Turnout for Republicans was about 45.5. So a little less than 2 points advantage for Democrat in a Democrat turnout. However, they still did not exceed the ballots in Maricopa as Republicans, even though, despite what everyone is trying to spin this morning, they absolutely expected that more ballots would come in for Mark Kelly than came in for Republican candidates. Why didn't that happen? Let's run the damn analysis report again. All right. You see, there's the state of Arizona. I selected jurisdiction here, and just to show you, I'll go back into it. County. See the little one next to county? That's because I selected one. I mean, the stuff. Maricopa is selected, okay, which means I only want to go to Maricopa. Don't show me the rest of the state. So when you go down and you look at the current query, which is how you query a database, people who are programmers know what I'm talking about. Jurisdiction, the data type, jurisdiction, geography, by county equals Maricopa. Demographics, maybe I'm going awry here, Laura, but I'm excluding dead people and change of address flags. And we know how this election is headed.
Right to vote. Come on now.
And remind me, by the way, to circle back to Michigan 13.
Mhm.
Everyone want to know why I spent a week talking about this last week did you see that quagmire of that disaster? She literally tried to say that people didn't show up for work and that's why they couldn't count their votes. But don't worry, she told us at 10 p.m., don't worry. They have super fast counting machines and that they don't need those people. They're going to catch up. Fast forward to midnight. Michigan 8 is almost totally in and it's less than 1% counted. Folks, it is not okay. It is not okay to count votes like this. And Jerry Nadler will tell us why a little bit later in the show. Look, we're going to do a little rewind time and get Jerry Nadler's take on this years ago, of course, before Democrats thought they needed something like this. Okay? So anyway, there's your selectors. Run an analysis report in Maricopa County. Party, gender, household income, marital status, ethnicity, education, religion, the basics. Those of you who watch the show, you know the basics, right? Okay? Let it run. While it's running, why don't I just, whatever, do some little retweets here while it's running. I'm sure it's back up by now. Here we go. Voter analysis report. You can see the time. I'm on Eastern time, 1:19. It reminds you of the query. I mean, I'm going over this because people pretend like this is up for debate. It's not up for debate. I don't know what you're doing. I don't even want to say their names because I don't want to give any other pundits any. I don't know what you're looking at. You're looking at what you want to look at. This is a database. It's not my opinion. It's not some poll the DCCC or the NRSC passed off to you during lunch. This is the database. Democrat 30.89, Republican 35.24. It's almost R plus 5. as it has been for a very long time. R4, R5, typically somewhere in between. The difference in the shift of 2 points in voter turnout for Democrats got it a little closer. But if they turned out 2% higher and still tens of thousands of ballots shy, that's why. Because there is a bigger pool of Republican voters in Maricopa County. And come November, they're going to vote for Donald Trump more than they would go out and cast a primary vote for Martha McSally. And we did this after 2018. Why did Trump win Maricopa by 5 and McSally lose it? And I went over some of the, on the ground things that happened, but it's more than that.
That's the happiest reason.
There are people who will vote for Donald Trump and won't vote for Martha McSally, folks. It's that simple. Okay? So here we are. This is not my damn opinion. So when you see these Arizona polls, because interestingly, with the exception of 1 or 2, Biden has largely led in Arizona. And if you look at, and I'm not picking on him, I'm simply saying, look at Ohio Predictive Insights 2 polls ago. They had Biden up huge in Maricopa County. Folks, the margin that he would have to win independents by in Maricopa County would to carry it by like 8 points would be ridiculous. On its face, it's laughable. If Joe Biden wins Arizona, just like with Sinema, the polls, Sinema +9, Sinema plus whatever, it turned out she won by 0.2%. If it turns out that Joe Biden wins Arizona, it will be because of a tiny, tiny, tiny squeaker. It will not be because he carried Maricopa County by 8 or 10 points. So a lot of you got a gut check yesterday. Republicans didn't even flex their muscles, and you see really what you're up against. It's a hard state for a Democrat to win. Is it impossible? No. But it's a hard state to win. And the polls that show Biden up the way he's up are ridiculous in Maricopa County. Good luck with that. Same thing with Georgia. I saw the New York Times Siena poll today. I like Siena. I do. But Georgia, again, I did a whole show on it. I'm not going to rehash it now because there was nothing relevant in Georgia last night. But that's even harder. That's about 3, probably about 3, a factor of 3. So again, knock yourself out if that's what you want to do. Okay. Chris Kobach lost. I know that Chris is popular among the Republican base, especially Trump supporters outside of the state. But he has had a lot of issues inside of the state. It would have, I'm not defending, Walsh or the Republican establishment candidate. I am not, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm simply making an observation. That's not what I do here, by the way. I'm simply making an observation that it is easier for the Republicans to hold on to control of the U.S. Senate because Chris lost. And I know a lot of you don't want to hear that, but a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort would have had to go into keeping that seat when it needs really to be spent elsewhere. The headwinds for this party, this election cycle, you got to be kidding me. The headwinds for this election cycle for this party are strong. They're strong. We have a lot of unprecedented events going on. Okay. So it is, what it is. Yeah. I mean, that's really, somebody was just saying about, Trump's win, what it means and retooling the party. Look, one election of one man, a revolution does not make. So I always found it to be a little bit naive that of course, Trump is an unprecedented president. And he is, I think, whether you agree with him or not is really kind of irrelevant. He's stood up to his vote for his voters against the ruling class to an unprecedented degree. I've never seen a president defend his voters the way that Donald Trump does against a constant onslaught, because they do go after you. They do. But Trump still stands between those voters and them.
those who want to do harm to them, which at this point I think is a accurate way, not hyperbolic way to characterize it. And they're going to come out for him, is to make a very long story short. They're going to come out for him. But it's still ahead. There's a lot of headwinds, a ton of headwinds. All right. So moving on to some of these other, like I said, the big story is the progressive victories, right? Both nomination wise and with Medicaid. And then Chris Kobach is a big deal for losing. It just is. And then, of course, Michigan 8 was so important. That's another big takeaway. You should really look at that when you're devising how the House may turn out. I'm not saying Slotkin still can't be defeated. As a matter of fact, I will show you real quick House, because this is a voter file day. You know what I mean? We're talking about elections. It's a voter file day. Let's run Michigan. Let me show you why it was, again, all the political stars aligned for Alyssa Slotkin. Michigan 8 is still very heavily, I mean, it's a Republican district. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But there are enough independents to keep an incumbent Democrat like Alyssa Slotkin, who pretends to be like a national security, mild-mannered, fair-minded, level-headed kind of candidate. There are enough independents there, especially if the issues we're talking about are healthcare and coronavirus. All right. So jurisdiction, congressional district. Where are you, Slotkin? There you are. All right. We can run it. I'll show you the party ID. Again, the biggest number of votes for Republicans comes out of Livingston County. There are about 110,000 Republicans in Livingston County. There are about 60,000 Republicans in Oakland County, which is getting pinker, and that's where Slotkin lives, by the way. And then there are about 40,000 voters in Ingham County, which is the only blue stronghold in the county. Paul had to rely on the votes of moderate Republicans in Ingham and moderate Republicans in Oakland to defeat Dittmer, who won the conservative base, which is the 50+% of the Republican electorate in Livingston County. All right. And that race has not been called yet, by the way. So I just am telling you what I see. I don't want to jump the shark here, But anyway, refreshing, run this analysis. You will see that Republicans greatly outnumber Democrats in this district. Okay. 27% Democrat, 41% Republican, just under 32% independent. Just for quick math there, folks, since you need to get to 50 plus 1, Democrats can win independents by a very large margin and still lose the district. But that's only if Livingston County gets out. That's it. This is how important it is. Out of the 207,000+ Republicans in Michigan 8, again, 110,000 of them are in Livingston County. Okay. And I want to show you that because let's go by party affiliation. By the way, insane database I created, right?
All by yourself.
All by myself. What amazing. Are you guys impressed with these ludicrous attacks and criticisms?
Well, that's because you present them with facts, and then they have no other option but to
way down the rabbit hole. This is something really neat, right? I did this all with like JavaScript and high charts. You idiots. All right, county. Let's add county, right? Because I'm trying to show you county. I added that feature last year. Just kidding.
Sure did.
Oh my God. All right. Here it is. All Republicans we're looking at here. Little over 207,000, like I said. So, of course, there's nothing there. And the household income, I'm trying to get down to county to show you the county, okay? Livingston County, 107,000 of them, but just about 52%. Sorry, I think I said 110 before. Sorry, I was a little off. All right. 52% Republican. They actually, turnout in Livingston was not bad. The problem is likes and Hoover, Allen, Hoover.
siphoned off votes that absolutely would have been Dittmer votes. And when you add the conservative vote together, he would have crushed them.
Well, this is what we're
And I mean, we don't do.
earlier, too.
Yeah, right,
Mhm.
right. Like, and in the beginning, there was another candidate, by the way, and she just went nowhere. I'm not going to even bring her up. But that was who the RNC secretly. And this is another thing they do to you guys. If you're Trump supporters, you may want to listen. They pretend they don't get involved in these primaries. They're so full of crap. They pass around, they help. Let me just say that. And it was conventional wisdom that a woman would have been a smarter choice to run against Alyssa Slotkin. That is how stupid the Nova DC-based Republican establishment strategy, political strategy, class, political pundit, pollsters, advisors. That is how stupid they are. They are that dumb. And they, of course, tried to help Ms. Snyder in the beginning a little bit, but she went absolutely nowhere. So there needed to be somebody else to come in because she couldn't raise money, which was a big problem. And the Republican Party, and this was an argument Dittmer was trying to make, but of course, you really, unless you have money to get that argument out, it's very hard to make any argument, right? But the Republican Party has money on reserve to get to whoever would have won this race. They need, if they're going to try to take out Alyssa Slotkin, they got to get that vote in Livingston out. You see it right here, folks. You see it right there. Republicans cannot win by barely carrying Oakland County, which has been the recent trend. Rogers, the district is not the same as it was under Rogers, who used to carry it by like 20 points, 16 points. It's a different district now. It's been redrawn. It's less Republican than it used to be, but it's still Republican. It's a Republican district. But it really doesn't matter if Oakland, which is the second biggest vote getter in the district, all right, you have Oakland, Northern Ingham, Livingston, those are where the votes are. If you cannot get your votes out because it encompasses all of Livingston County. If you can't get out Brighton, what's the other one? I certainly can, guys. Absolutely. Let me load in. And if you guys can't see, then let me know. All right. The pie kind of killed the pie zooming in that much, but you should be able to see it a little bit better. If you cannot get this vote out, if you're a Republican candidate, you're going to lose. And what happened with Mike Bishop, he fell asleep at the wheel. He fell asleep. And then the voters in Ingham and Oakland that are more moderate, but still independent and have in the past voted Republican, when they could not get them out. Bishop fell asleep. He didn't realize healthcare was happening. By the time he realized it in polling that he was down a few points, it was too late. He could have had Livingston save him, but he wasn't the right candidate for that. He wasn't. And that was the point. I don't ever want to get in like a district and influence voters and like come along and like use like, what's the word? The reputation for projection to influence voters. Like, I don't want to go into Michigan 8 and tell them what's best for them, and say, if you elect Paul Young, you're going to watch a painful squeaker of a loss in November. I don't want to use that. It's almost like I feel like it's abusing my, what's the word I'm looking for? But it's like abusing my reputation. Yeah, it's manipulation. That's great. Like, oh, he's a forecaster. If he's saying it must be true, better vote for what he said. That people should not do that stuff. So I didn't want to say this, but I'm telling you, it's not going to be a blowout. That's even going to make it worse for Trump supporters. That's the worst part about it. It's not going to be a blowout, but I don't see him getting that vote out. Do you think the people who voted for likes are gonna race to the ballot box to vote for Paul Young, who basically, and for those of you who don't know the story, he just went back to the district a few months before the deadline to file. He's not from Michigan 8. I mean, he is. I think he was like 3 or something when he left. I'm not kidding. I mean, He has not lived there. She's going to label him a carpetbagger. And while it's true she was in D.C. for many, many years, her family farm has been in Holly. So it's legit for Alyssa Slotkin to say, this guy's a carpetbagger. And carpetbaggers, folks, that's good for 3 points. Ask Scott Brown in New Hampshire. That's good for 3 points. This is a race Republicans should win by 7-9 points on a bad year. And you're looking at like a 1 to 3 point squeaker. If I was Paul, I'd be on the phone today with Mike Dittmer like this. Hey, Mike, great race. You know, no hard feelings. Do me a favor and work with me until November to get Livingston out for me.
Pretty please.
Pretty please with sugar on top. Because that is what he's going to need.
Sure is.
It's just, you know, and what does this mean? It means for Donald Trump that, you know, the top of the ticket, the bottom of the ticket, they should all always work together. That is the best kind of a ticket. And, you know, Peters and Biden are going to do it, folks. Slotkin, Biden, and Peters are going to have a uniform message. Everybody is. They're going to have.
Good at that.
They're Democrats are excellent at that. They are excellent. And of course they have the media handicap to help them, you know, but they are very good for that. And, you know, somebody is asking me for that, you know, on Twitter. I'm pulling it up. Give me a second. I'm going to get Nadler on ballots. Michigan 13 was an utter catastrophe. It was everything I told you could happen and worse. The longer these people count ballots, paper ballots, the more potential for fraud, and not even potential. I mean, you'd be an idiot to believe it's not going on. Don't take my word for it.
It's strange to observe that in my experience in New York, paper ballots are extremely susceptible to fraud. And at least with the old clunky voting machines that we have in New York, the deliberate fraud is way down compared to paper. When the machines break down, they vote on paper. We've had real problems. So there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. I'm simply observing that as a problem. There's got to be a way of getting the best of our methodologies.
But in fact, the MIT studies have shown that hand-counted paper ballots are among the most reliable. And at least if there's a miscount, you can discover it. You can't discover miscounts with these
then
machines.
Maybe optical scan with paper. I want a paper trail. I want paper somewhere. But pure paper with no machines, I can show you experience which would make your head spin.
And we thank you for.
I can show you from experience. It'll make your head spin. Is Jerry Nadler now a right-wing conspiracy theorist? Is Jerry Nadler right-wing? I mean, are we for real with this? I mean, guys, really. I mean, has it come to that? Has it come to the point where you can't show somebody, you're like, what did they used to call it, Laura? The tail of the tape or something? What was that? It's like the tail of the tape.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just show somebody just what is footage. Okay, I didn't make that up. Just like I created the voter file database. All right, I didn't make that up. That's Jerry Nadler, younger Jerry Nadler, back in the day when even the New York Times used to report what fraud came from these, you know, the more paper ballots flying around. And essentially we have seen that in Clark County already. The fraud, you know, the ballots are everywhere. I mean, they're pinned to cork boards with the thumbtacks. They're littering the streets, as the Las Vegas Journal Review said. Fox News reported they found a bunch in garbage cans. I mean, you know, which, by the way, according to the investigation conducted by the law firm, that is, they were pulling ballots out of garbage cans in Arizona. I mean, so I want to say this again too, because I think people misunderstand why I'm doing this and why I'm hammering this so much. I am not trying to sow distrust. All right. And I'm not doing it to support anyone or any party or anything. I'm not trying to sow distrust. I'm trying to show a reveal that there already is a reason to distrust. And why I'm trying to do it now. Because when it's learned later it doesn't really matter which side wins. First of all, the left will never, if Donald Trump wins in November, the left will go nuts. They're never going to accept the results of the election. It's not going to happen. And they will figure out reasons why. If not, they'll fabricate it like they fabricated Russia collusion. Okay. But the right has been generally well behaved, right? Up until now. Once they decide or determine that the electoral process and the government itself, whatever it may be, no longer works for them, they don't have recourse. Like the ballot box is supposed to be the ultimate recourse. If petitioning, grievances isn't working, the ballot box is supposed to be it. That's it. Once they determine, I am legit afraid for the future, the stability of the country, the political stability of the country. Regime credibility is everything. Regime credibility in different countries, different nation states comes from different places. Depends what kind of system of government, what kind of culture they have. We are a self-governing society. And in a self-governing society, if election integrity is in doubt, then regime credibility disappears, and then the right of the government or the elected or supposedly elected officials to govern the citizenry fades away. Everybody stops obeying. And if you think that's far off, I would ask you to ask yourself take a pause for a second and ask yourself, 10 years ago, would you ever have thought serious proposals to defund the police would be taken seriously or taken up by city councils, override the vetoes of mayors in cities, over the objections of female African American police chiefs in major urban centers? That is the nature of history. Like I said yesterday, it's once it gets bad, once things start going south, it's regressive and it devolves very quickly. So I'm not trying to do this to sow distrust. I'm trying to avoid a freaking catastrophe, because it is going to be a catastrophe. It is. Doesn't really matter. Again, that's true no matter which side wins. No matter which side wins. I will just tell Laura, the commenter, Republicans did win important victories in Florida, which is what you saw Trump's tweet about yesterday. I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago. What Trump was trying to say is we did stop what they were asking for, which was a moratorium on two things, which we go back to our graphics. A moratorium on verification procedures, signature match, voter ID, and they wanted a moratorium on ballot harvesting. So both are codified in Florida election law. That all came post Bush v. Gore and the hanging chads, which, if you guys are old enough to remember, was a quagmire in and of itself. The left, if 9/11 didn't hit, George Bush would have had a similar problem, being plagued with what's the word I'm looking for? Allegations that he was an illegitimate president. It didn't matter that later recounts showed that he actually won the state of Florida by a larger vote. But what was happening there? They were trying to delay the vote count. And what happened? More and more ballots that were fraudulent were counted. The race got very close. Out of millions of votes, we were talking about 500 plus votes. And when the dust settled, and the Washington Post, not exactly the Heritage Foundation, went in there and ran their own investigation at their own expense, which cost the head his job, Bush won that state by a larger margin. Why? Because there were tons of votes. The longer the charade goes on, the more votes that are illegal should not be counted. And if you think I'm joking, look at New York. The judge just ruled yesterday. Those 120,000 ballots, whatever it is, that came after being the postmark deadline, counted after myriad problems with these ballots, the liberal judge ruled they had to be counted. So, don't be surprised by what you see in history. Don't be surprised. I'm sorry, folks. I'm absolutely blind. Yeah. Dewey versus Truman. That was another shocker. And then people wonder, how could this have happened? I tell the story a lot about because it's not just the right. The media likes to pretend it's just the right, but it's not. My son's old tennis coach, big time liberal, Bernie lover, but big time liberal, absolutely hated Rick Scott, thought that he was going down to Bill Nelson. No way Rick Scott's going to beat Bill Nelson. And he knew what I did for a living. And I would show him, because we started tracking that race in February. It was pretty clear Rick Scott was going to be the nominee. We started tracking that race in February. I also told him that the Gillum versus DeSantis polling was not going to be right. And, he didn't want to believe me. I said, listen, don't get your hopes up, that he was beside himself. He cited, no joke, that CNN, Gillum plus 12, right? Gillum plus, how could he have made up 12 points? He was never ahead by 12 points. And then his wheels start to turn. What the hell did because it was Governor Scott at the time. What did Governor Scott do? CNN had him up by 12. What did Governor Scott do to steal the election for his friend? Meanwhile, as you all know, I'm sure if you're watching this show, you know full well the effort to steal anything was going on in Broward County, and it was not Rick Scott's effort. No. I mean, there are election laws, folks. We got to abide by the rules. You can't count votes that come in after Election Day. And by the way, the left is way out there with this. You poll people on this, it's across the board. Only more left-wing Democrats want to expand the number of days we count votes. Overwhelmingly, the vast majority, from obviously, big numbers of Republicans, a majority of independents, and about a third to 4 out of 10 Democrats will tell you that elections should be decided on Election Day. We should not count ballots that come in after the deadlines. Everybody, it's common sense. It's common sense. You'd never think that looking on Twitter, because if it's a left-wing user on Twitter, they want to count votes for a month. But they don't really represent the entire Democratic Party. They don't. They may represent a majority, but they don't represent like a big majority at all. And that certainly is not in alignment with Republicans and independents. Pretty much everybody is, it's not political animals don't think the way we do, because we are political animals. And if something like Michigan 13 was to transpire, by the way, in an emerging democracy that Bill Kristol convinced us to topple and nation build, if that was to happen, the UN overseers, Laura, they would have field days that certain precincts that were, dominated by one party, they would have they throw a fit if they saw certain areas that were dominated by certain parties were not counting votes. And it was taking them days and week and 2 weeks to count the results. They would never deal. Folks, in emerging democracies, they're not allowed to do this. We're supposed to be the beacon. And why? What is the rationale for how the UN and sets guidelines for new self-governing countries? Because they understand the potential for corruption and fraud. And everybody just, Young Kim is a great example. What happened to that woman was a disgrace. Not to use Trump's every time he was like, that's a disgrace. What happened is no, it was a disgrace. Young Kim became the first declared winner to go to Washington, D.C., be sworn in as a freshman congresswoman, to lose her election 2 weeks later. And it was not a small margin that she was up by. A couple points in a district. So many districts around this country, a couple points is a lot to make up when there's supposedly 98% reported. You just cannot find 3,500 ballots somewhere that are going to go 95-5 to you. It's not plausible. So I'm hammering this issue because I'm concerned. I'm very, very concerned. We cannot do this for another election, Laura. We can't take much more of this where somebody just doesn't, where there's just some, we have to have a peaceful transition of power. This country has only worked like this for as long as it has because there's the peaceful transition of power.
Yes.
You may not like the result, but you got to respect it. You have to accept it. And then there's a honeymoon, small honeymoon. Then we go back to beating the crap out of each other and arguing. That's America. That's the American way. We cannot do this again where there's no peaceful transition. The left now in 20 years has prevented the peaceful transition of 2 presidencies. One completely and hindered his administration, which we've seen. I'm talking, of course, about the Trump presidency. Go ahead.
Well, the problem also is that this is blatant cheating. It's in your face. We don't care if you see it
Bite
coming.
me.
Yes.
I don't.
I mean, how dare they do that and think that they're not going to get the results that they're receiving?
Go run to CNN.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, go run to CNN. And what she means by blatant, again, folks, is the conclusion to the 3 pillars here of this that we have been talking about for a week. There is no innocent explanation. It's blatant.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally blatant. Everybody, the first step is to get this giant pool of votes and ballots to make it easy. This giant pool that no one's going to request, right? Nobody real is going to request. And then 2, that won't matter if there are still verification procedures in place. So we got to get rid of the verification procedures. Axios is wrong. Rona, in her thread yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it was, Rona McDaniel, she is right. Axios is absolutely wrong. And I'll debate any of them on it. Come on the show. It's a quick link. We'll have a civil discussion. And you can watch me scan through the database. But it didn't matter if everybody gets those ballots, if there are still verification procedures and protections in place, which, by the way, are right through state laws across this country. But unless there's a moratorium, then that would be great. Now, who else is going to go out and get them? Well, we're going to need an army of ballot harvesters to actually go and collect them. That is what Laura means by this is blatant. It's so obvious. And people like Ari, and I've been picking on Ari a couple of weeks now, but again with because he's bringing it up. He keeps bringing it up. Ari, the gullibility that you display is how we got here. It's how for decades now, one issue after the other, they've relied on the gullibility of Republicans like Ari, and I'm sure he's a very nice man. Sure, that's irrelevant to what the hell we're talking about here. I mean, he seriously is giving the benefit of the doubt that there's like another alternative explanation for this. And then he says, and look, the judge's decision yesterday showed how ridiculously gullible he is. Is this not a minor mistake like the New York Times characterizes it? It's a big mistake, and those are illegal votes. And I said, hello, Ari, it's intentional. No, they're going to throw him out. Okay. Well, that judge just ruled yesterday those aren't getting thrown out. So, I mean, Ari, wake up. Beating a dead horse here, man. Where's that Guns N' Roses song? We need that damn Guns N' Roses song. Beating a dead horse over here. It's really, I mean, it's driving me crazy. I like, though, that I am seeing people like Molly Hemingway on Twitter. She's coming around. She gets it. I mean, she's not. After, by the way, Molly is, for those of you who don't know, did a lot of work on the Russia collusion hoax. And so I guess once you witness something like that, like nothing is unbelievable anymore, right? Nothing is would surprise you, right? All right, look, before we transition into Barnes, all right, I'm going to blast through some other news here, which I think is pretty important to share, okay? There are, bear with me for a second here, folks, okay? That's the old one. I already showed you that one. That's done. We went over that already. But it piggybacks off of what we were talking about the other day, which is, where are you? So the ISM does the non-manufacturing index and the manufacturing index. And the NMI is, of course, of the service sector, non-manufacturing, right? Let's take a quick peek at this while we wait for Robert, okay? And we're going to transit into it. Eventually, this will be split up. We're like debating a couple of things, but it won't be inside the numbers. We're going to do inside the numbers, then we're going to roll into this new show. It's a complete new show. And Barnes has got a lot on the betting markets that I've wanted to talk, because I get a lot of questions about betting markets, but I wanted to bring some, I'm just really glad we worked this out, because he is the perfect guy to bring on about betting markets and what they really mean, how they work. Are they influenced by the polls? Are the polls influencing, them, whatever? Are they really what, others like Stossel predict they're more accurate than polls, or do they fall? We'll get into it. There's so much there. And Barnes has made a lot of money, folks, betting on races that polls showed people would lose. And the betting odds were favorable for the underdog if you were to be able to pick an underdog. So he's just a perfect guy to do it. He really is.
Made a lot of money off
Yeah, he was looking at PPD in 2016, and good for him.
Sharing's caring, Bob.
That's funny stuff, but that's not what we did it for. Good for him. Yeah, but this ISM non-manufacturing index, the NMI, ticked higher to 58.1 in July, which of course beat the forecast, of course. The service sector now, folks, has posted strong numbers for the second straight month. Last month, for June, it was the fastest increase on the history of the survey. So we did see the fastest decline, and now we saw the fastest increase. The reading indicates, of course, the service sector expanded for the second straight month after 2 months in contraction. 58.1, as I said, is stronger than economists expected. The forecasts range from a low of 53.5 to a high of 57.5. The consensus was 55 flat. In June, the NMI posted the largest single-month percentage gain since the NMI debuted in 97, and is now in July at its highest level since February 2019. Does that sound familiar? We went over the manufacturing index, which is the PMI, and it should sound familiar from the other day. Here is the entire trend since this is the entire history right here of the NMI, the non-manufacturing index. Here we are now, all right, at 58.1. And here's where you have to go all the way back. Pre-pandemic, height of the Trump boom. What does this suggest? If Democrats don't kill the economy, the potential for a serious recovery is real.
Beautiful.
It's real. It's real. Why? Because they deal and dole out the results for both the manufacturing and service sectors. Respondents, and this is what the Anthony Neves, I think, is that how you say his name? Yeah, he runs the NMI. And he said, respondents remain concerned about the pandemic. However, they are mostly optimistic about business conditions and the economy as businesses continue to reopen. Sentiment varies across industries as they are impacted differently. That was a very realistic comment. You guys can go through this. Important to note, new orders are booming. High 60s. Typically, you could be scared from that. Like maybe it's overheating and then supplies don't keep up. But if you go in and read it a little bit, it's always linked. You can go in and read it. It needed it. We would get a little bit concerned if it remained there for like four months or something, because then that would show the potential for overheating. It just wouldn't keep up. What you're looking for is solid but sustainable growth. All right. And then the ISM manufacturing index, the PMI, as we spoke about the other day, also came in stronger than expected in July, up to 54.2 from 52.6 in June. The PMI also exceeded pre-pandemic levels. And that one hit the highest level since April of 2019. It's good news, folks. It's really good news. And we are starting to see actual hard data to back up some of those survey panels like the ISM and others. We are seeing some hard data for that. ADP, big disappointment, 188,000 or something, or it was like 167 when they expected almost 1.9 million jobs. Folks, I don't know what the hell the ADP is doing, because the revisions in the last 3 months have been like inexplicable, where, the economy lost how many millions? It was like ridiculous revision. It ended up being true that actually the economy gained 3.5 million jobs that month. So I'm going to reserve judgment that's why the markets, they're shrugging it off. They're looking at the ISM, like I told you, the PMI and the NMI move markets. And we're back to now at a point where economic data is absolutely impacting the markets. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to reserve judgment on it. Markets are shrugging it off a little bit. I'm going to shrug it off, and let's see what the revision says next month. And also, we have the employment situation out on Friday. That will tell us. Jobless claims, I don't like what I'm seeing. The freaking CARES Act was a mistake. The provision in the CARES Act was bad public policy, coupled with even worse, stupid public policy called the shutdown, which the evidence is showing increasingly does not stop the spread of the virus or slow the spread of the virus. All right. We will get back into that too, by the way. Not today, but we will. Today's an election and economy day. All right. But look, oh my goodness gracious, it's already 2:01. May run a little late today, Barnes. All right. But he may. But we'll roll with the punches either way. I'm looking over here to my right. I can see in my peripherals. I can see in my peripherals that there's a million questions here. Okay. I can already see what she's doing to me. I love answering your questions, but if it was up to Laura, the whole show would be about questions. Like, I would do nothing but answer questions. And I guess, you know what? That's what Friday's for, really. But, right? It's Freewheeling Friday. All right. But I'm going to take a quick break. Everybody needs a little bit of water. And, that's yours.
Nice try.
Have a bottle of water, baby. That's what you got to do, gentlemen. After 15 years of marriage, I get a bottle of water. Look, the older you get, the more of a baby you get. That's the secret. Okay. Just be a man with everything else. Just be alpha boy with everything else, and then of course, let them know you love and appreciate them. That's really the big deal. Right. All right. Thank you, darling. Thank you, my love. All right. So when we get back, we'll have Robert Barnes. All right. We're going to kick off that new show. I hope you enjoyed the hour of Inside the Numbers. I'm going to take a quick break. 2 minutes. We'll be back. Don't forget to subscribe. Oh my God, we're almost there. It's so close. Barnes gave us a boost for sure. He did. Barnes gave us a boost. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, folks. It's imperative that we get to that milestone. I think we're like 50 subscribers away. And Robert and I will tell you why when we start. All right. But it's imperative. And then, of course, don't blame me. Your Facebook users, roll all over to Facebook and like the page, People's Pundit Daily. Either one, turn on your notifications. This way you know when we're coming on. We want you to come in on this new show we're doing. We want you to come in and chat with us. Okay? So definitely make sure that you do that. And, of course, the best way to support the show is to subscribe to PPD, ppdnews.us/subscribe. All right, folks. I'll be back in 2 minutes on the flip side.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats is restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear overnight, just to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. Cause I just wanna be your bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
All right, folks, welcome back. And it is the first of Inside the Numbers with Barnes and Baris. Inside the polls. What are the odds with Barnes and Baris? I kind of like that one too. All right, so I'm going to bring on Robert. Let's make sure audio is cool. Yeah, audio is good. How's it going, Robert? Got a little audio issue there? He does. Got a little feedback? There you go. That's better. It's the headset. I can't hear you. We'll bring give me a second. We'll talk privately with him. We'll fix it. Let me bring up the betting odds thing anyway, and we'll bring him back. His headset, he's telling me he can't hear. So I don't know if he can hear me, but that's what the private thing is for. So I can send him a quick little thing. Okay, all is good, Robert. Do what you got to do. I'm gonna bring on, and I don't normally do this. When he gives me the okay, I'll shoot him back on. But I wanted to start with this, the betting odds with Maxim Lot, John Stossel. Really cool website. I don't know if you guys follow it. You know, I don't know how everyone else is with betting odds. But this is definitely something I want to get Barnes' take on. People ask me all the time, and John Stossel, for those of you who don't know him, used to be on Fox Business. All right. He used to constantly argue that betting odds are more accurate than the polls. And, you know, they're more accurate because, basically, people put their money where their mouth is, right? So with, polls aren't, there's no financial incentive there. I thought it was the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard in my life. Of course, there's a financial incentive in the polling industry. Spoken like a true person who doesn't work in the polling industry, right? So, all right, let's see if he's back. I think we got him back in a second. Let's see. We back here, Robert? How we doing? Not quite. But it's still not feeding back, so we'll give him a second. Spoken like a true person who's not in the polling industry. If you look at the track record, and I got two of them here because electionbettingodds.com doesn't do this, but Real Clear Politics does. And you can look at the trend, the expectations question, the voter expectations question, okay? Who do you think is going to win the election? There's a lot of data to suggest, at least when you go back to Gallup, the old, back in the day when Gallup was all there was, right? There was a lot that you could say it was apples to apples comparisons. Now we have all these different polls. It's difficult. But the voter expectations question, if you use older historical polling data, could actually be more predictive than the top line number itself. Okay. This is what, in my view, and when I just can't, I got to bring him on to bring up, he'll do this better than me, but betting odds are fueled by polls, folks. There's no secret sauce, right? People changed their minds even though they didn't change their voter expectations. So in the polls, there's been a few outliers, but generally speaking, even though the betting odds now, what do we got here on elections.com? 59.2% for Biden. That's down a tenth of a percent. 37.7% for Trump. That's up a half a percentage point. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, yeah, that's abysmal. Trump actually led, though, for, let's see, going to Real Clear Politics till June 4th. That flipped. June 4th.
All right. And I'm going to show everybody, bear with me, folks. I want to show you the RCP one too. Okay. Because it looks like the charts I showed you the other day. Okay. I mean, it looks exactly like it. If you can see, I know you're probably going to ask me to make it look bigger. I will. I'll zoom in. Where did Biden take the lead here, folks? In June 2nd, right, is when he overall took it. That is exactly what we went over the other day when we talked about not only Trump's approval rating, but his national top line numbers versus Biden in head-to-head, right? Late May, early June, coronavirus really started to hurt. Hey, RCP, I know you got to get your money from somewhere, but the ads they're up there, buddies. All right, there's a lot of, not as bad as it used to be, and I love RCP's website now compared to what it used to be. But yeah, in any event, the polls moved first a little bit earlier in late May. And then when the polls started to move, and June 2nd, June 4th, the betting odds changed. And my point being is that there is no secret sauce. So if people are following the polls, the opportunity for people like political gamblers like Robert, is there. And let's see. Let me jump back on. Bear with me for a second, folks. Let me see if he's good to go here. How we doing, Robert? That sounds much better. I think you're with us now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. I mean, it's a little muffled, but we'll deal.
Perfect, no problem.
All right. I don't know if you could hear me while you were in the queue waiting, but where I was going with this is the other day we went on the approval rating, the head-to-head with Biden, right? And when Trump started to get hurt by coronavirus, and then looking at the chart for RCP, who aggregates the election betting odds, it was a lagging indicator. The betting odds were like, tell me what you think in the argument of betting odds versus polls. Like John Stossel, for instance, definitely takes the position that betting odds are a better indicator, right? I tend to think it's a lagging indicator, and they just follow the polls. Where do you stand on this?
It sort of depends because it's who's moving the market. So you have people who basically are able to those are people who bet a large amount of money, and then you have people who are just a large number of bettors betting, and those are two very different things. And so, for example, the volume bettors are still betting heavily Trump. But big money coming in, and big money, the other key is that almost all political betting takes place in the United Kingdom. So that's the other unique factor you have in here. Once the U.S. legalizes political betting, I think then you'll get it. It'll be a data point worth watching, and it probably won't as closely track the polls. We have a small scale version of U.S. political betting, which is unpredicted, but you're capped to how much you can bet per bet. It's like $150. The net effect of that is you get a lot of data nerds, people like that. You get a certain subcategory of people betting, but not getting your people who are really taking a long, hard look at it. Whereas your big money bettors, some of your smart bettors, they bet a different way. Now, from a betting market perspective, for Brexit and Trump in the primaries and for Trump in the general, tracking who the street bettor was betting was actually significant. And this is one of those circumstances where, in most contexts where the public is betting in a sports bet context, most sports bettors would say ignore that because they tend to be on the wrong side of the aisle. But in politics, the opposite because of the demographics of who's betting. So when you're tracking how working class Englishmen are betting, I think is actually very useful. It was very useful for Brexit. If you were tracking that, it told you that Brexit was going to succeed. But the big money in the betting market, that Brexit had no chance. So it was one of those situations where because the amount of money was shaping the market size, rather than rather than the amount of bettors, you attract the betting market, you would be misled about Brexit. If you track what the ordinary bettor was doing, you would have been ahead of the curve on Brexit. Similarly, they were ahead of the curve on Trump in the UK in terms of working class bettors. But again, there was a big gap. Big money bettors almost all. Here's who they really follow. They track the polls but they really love, and particularly the bookmakers, love Nate Silver. So
Right.
it's extraordinary. They think Nate Silver is the gift that keeps on giving. And in large part because of when Silver rose. Political betting at a major level in the UK book market, bookies, did not start until 2008. And really took off in 2012. The reason for this is there's a betting market in the United Kingdom called Betfair, which is a pub. It's like trading stocks. You can get into the market at any time. That revolutionized sports betting in the United Kingdom, but it especially created the market for political betting. But to this day, about 90% of all political bets are placed on that single market. Now you have to be a UK citizen or have a UK fund in order to bet on that market. But the bookies can make easy money playing both sides. That's another story.
So you go and I hear. Can we just turn the volume a little bit down, and then that'll probably help. There's just a little bit distorted, like a little distorted. There's nothing we can do about the reverb or delay or anything, but. Yeah, when we get this squared away, what I really want to ask him is, people ask me, and I'm not a political gambler, so I don't know how to ask this question. Laura will tell you, I'm not a good gambler at all. Like, I'm not a gambler, so I try to basically tell them what I can, but I want you to explain to people what you have to do, and then when you do, because people always ask me, well, what does it mean? So right now you have Biden at, what is it? Well, now actually he's down a little bit more again. That's funny. Happens in real time. But you got to go to England.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Let's able to get down or no?
Yeah, I mean that's actually better. Some of the whatever reverb or delay, we can't do anything about that. The volume is much better, right? Volume's better, guys. Tell me. Okay.
How about that?
That's better. It's better.
There you go. Yeah. I got fancy equipment. Just got to use it.
Maybe you just go back a little bit from it. That's all. Just come back a little bit.
Is that good?
That's much better. Much better. Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. So you have to go to the UK, place a political bet. The political betting market, other than the predicted has some markets, not a fantastic level of betting markets. It get cap restricts, and you get a different better. You like in the kingdom, your ordinary working class, what they call punter, will bet on elections. In the United States, not really true. It's mostly you're sort of, it's to the left overwhelmingly predicted for the most part. You have some people who are on the right main bets, but mostly data people. And most people from the professional class at some level, a lot of young people. So it's a very different dynamic, and it doesn't really reflect. It's a useful metric to be when discrepancies appear. But otherwise, it has limitations. But you're right. Fundamentally, most of these markets are following, right now at least, the polls, particularly certain analysts. So Silver has huge influence. Then you have people like Nate Cohn at New York Times, Harry Ent at CNN, now Elliot Merce at The Economist. They had additional influence. But in particular, because the political betting markets are located in the UK for the most part, the big influence is still Nate Silver, and in particular, because Silver won in 2012, got it right, quote unquote. Now he got it right for completely wrong reasons. That's another story. His analysis. I was going to bet heavy on. I'm betting on presidential elections since 1988 as a kid. So had ever lost money betting on a presidential election in the U.S. or in Europe, made money betting on prime minister elections in both France and the UK. In that context, I planned on betting on. I give people two cues for presidential betting. These are the only factors I would bet on, which is whether the incumbent party has meaningful opposition within the party, and secondly, whether the party in opposition looks to their field and says, do they look to them and say, we want to vote for the person we think would make the best president? Or do they look to their field and say, we want to vote for the best politician who can beat the other guy?
Right.
Because when they make that second choice, they have always lost. But they tend to do it whenever they recognize the incumbent strong. They may not overtly state, but when they're unconsciously recognizing this is a strong incumbent, they become obsessed with the incumbent. So for me, the first big win I had, I had never lost a presidential bad election, but the one that was the biggest win for me cash-wise initially was George W. Bush, because election night, as you've talked about recently on the show, on election night, they misread the exit polls. And so W dropped to 3-1 on election night. So I got a 3-1 return in less than 8 hours. It was out hammering it every which way. That was when you had some online betting options that were legal in the United States to bet on politics. Then the 2012, I thought would be a money maker, but again, my system, Romney fits the politician choice, just like John Kerry did, just like Bob Dole did, just like Walter Mondale did. All of them, when I saw Romney get picked, number one, and then two, saw Bob had no meaningful opposition within his own party. My view was Obama was going to win re-election, and that's the betting system I had. I looked at other data, but I really expanded the scope of data I looked at until 2016. And so I planned on betting on Obama, and I was like, why isn't he at 50% or 45%, given how competitive the polls are? It was all because Nate Silver kept hammering Obama had a 90-95% chance.
Right.
So I ignored it, Silver. So I was like, okay, maybe he's on to something similar to what I'm on to. And then I researched him, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks registered voter polls are predictable, likely voter polls. And the reality is now there were a couple of giveaways in the polls. African American voters were showing record-setting voter enthusiasm in 2012. If you track back prime turnout, there was unusually high turnout for a completely uncompetitive presidential primary amongst black voter groups in a range of cities. And third, growing up doing a lot of civil rights cases, having run African American candidate political office before, I knew, especially when they seek re-election the first time. And we could have gone back and looked at when Maynard Jackson first ran for re-election, or any other major black political figure when they were the first in office to be a black political figure in that office. The black community rallies to them almost every time.
Yeah,
they're going to protect them. And so given, I was like, okay, what's going to happen is the reason why the polls are wrong is they're estimating the black share of the vote, slightly overestimating aspects of the white share of the vote, because there's going to be a lot of voters who, particularly the working class, who just don't like Mitt Romney and never liked neocon Republicanism, and W had killed that.
Never. Yeah.
But 05, 06, George W. But people say Donald Trump created a new Republican Party. I always say George W. Bush killed the old one.
Yeah.
It just took a decade to figure it out.
Absolutely. So true.
So given that, I wanted to bet on Obama, but Obama was at 65% of the markets, and that was still decent. But you're getting 1/3. You're making a 30-35% profit, not for a couple of weeks' work. But it would have been much lower, but for Nate Silver, and it turned that way. The bookies were, Nate Silver's a guru. Now, the fact he got 2010 UK wrong, 2010 midterms wrong, 2014 Senate race wrong, 2015 UK race wrong, and the entire 2016 primaries wrong still didn't scare them off, astoundingly. And then 2016 come around. In 2016, I spent a lot more time, because it was the first time I was betting on a candidate that I liked. Most of the time, I just cared about my money. I didn't care about the policies. But Trump, I liked. That made me nervous. It made me worried. I thought, okay, I may get information bias. All the biases I study as a trial lawyer.
You worry about it yourself. It influences
exactly.
yourself.
Very easy. So, and the polls were telling me I was wrong. Oh, and no, it was just the national polls, the state polls.
Sure.
They basically, they ended up with average bias about 6 points. They inflated Hillary margin. If you look at all polls or the whole election cycle, the average, and I'm talking about media university polls. I ignore. I pay attention to the others, but I don't factor that in. I didn't look at media bias. Because of that, I got nervous. So I went to the Democratic convention. I went to the Republican convention. I traveled throughout Western Ohio. Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio, because those were right in between the two. And I found ways to ask people questions that was like an early test polling. aside from looking at yard signs and bumper stickers and all those kind of indicia, people willing to how enthusiastic they truly were for a candidate, all of which massively favored Trump in what should have been Democrat parts of the country, at least historically. And then so you're like Youngstown, you're talking about the rural area outside Pittsburgh, places like that. Talking about old mining country in the southwest corner of the state. Then you get into sort of near Amish country in the middle of the state. James Carville's great statement about Pennsylvania is still true. You got Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and in between is the state of Alabama. And if people have been paying attention to voter registration trends, recognize that what's been happening over 4 years is the Alabama part of Pennsylvania is trending heavily Republican.
Absolutely.
And voter registration and the rest. The idea that Biden's going to walk away with that hate because he lived in Delaware and Pennsylvania just ain't happening.
Crazy rationale, Robert. Crazy rationale. I'm shocked how strong Trump is in Pennsylvania. I am. I'm stunned, but maybe not really. I just thought, I learned a lesson in 2016. I was halfway not believing my own numbers because, like you were saying, you look and it's an enormous amount, especially since it was really the first real public stuff we did. It's the pressure is enormous, and you're like, wait a minute, it must be something. It must be me, because how could everybody else be so wrong? It's got to be me. So I was not confident. Although I would triple and quadruple check our work, I'm like, it was always something weighing on me. Like maybe they know something I don't. Maybe I know something they don't. I hope that's the case. But it was, basically difficult for me to have 100% because I know about the biases like you were talking about, and I'm thinking, I hope it's something is not leaking in here. So Wisconsin, I didn't believe at all. And then he won, and he won it earlier than the rest of the Rust Belt states. So this year, going into it, I was thinking Pennsylvania would be one of the harder ones. In truth, he's running stronger right now in Pennsylvania than he is in Wisconsin, and that's because big independent vote. So he's got to shore that up. But yeah, I mean, it's tough, man, to go against the grain like that.
Well, the funny thing is I ended up doing a crash course in polling because I was trying to figure out, okay, what is this one data point? And I looked for a wide range of data points, and I started to expand, other than my historic metrics, which are still the primary basis I look at. The incumbent party was divided in 2016. The Republican Party focused on who they liked the most, not vote who was the most electable, because it was almost universally thought of in the primaries. Trump was not electable in the general. They didn't care.
Never, right, yeah.
Exactly, but those are usually when people vote. When people think about electability, they all look to someone who reminds them of a politician. It's a terrible choice. When people vote who they actually like the most, they tend to vote for the best actual person who can win. Bernie Sanders, in my view, though there were others, but like for example, the Montana governor, that would have been a tough competitor for Trump.
Sure,
that would have been a sign that Trump was in trouble.
Absolutely,
if you had a guy like that be the Democratic nominee, particularly given that the whole group now is northern working class voters. And I started tracking people even in non-competitive states. So like you looked at northern, I went upstate New York 2016, and the reason is because you got a bunch of white ethnics that vote almost the same way as the same voter groups in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota, because they come from the same cultural constituencies, have a lot of the same overlap. Many of them are practicing Catholics at some level. Yeah. So they give you a lot of clues. You can look to places that other people are not paying attention to see what people are actually doing to give you data points. Also, I hope they bring it, but they might not. And in the current BLM environment, may not have a predictive effect. But I love the 7-Eleven coffee poll because you could actually track individual 7-Elevens all across the country. And there was already a Democratic bias within that, but you could factor that into it. Like with Facebook likes, there was a heavy Bernie Sanders bias inside Facebook likes, but you could look at a Facebook primary poll where the 538 released the data in 2016. Notably, they're not doing it in 2020.
Not this time. Yep.
No chance they'll do it because Biden has. What's fascinating is how Biden has gone nowhere in social media. Obama took off in social media once social media became functionary. Trump off in social media. But a sign that he was in trouble was that she had no enthusiasm on social media. Nobody was tracking her. Nobody was following her. Nobody cared what she said today, which for rally size was one of the more odd points that people could have pointed out. But there are all these other metrics out there: yard signs, bumper stickers, active noise. There's certain internet sites will track the amount of talk and discussion over a candidate, trends. All of these I look at, and all of those pointed in 2016 heavily toward Trump, aside from the polls. But I found talking to people through Pennsylvania and Ohio, and then I had a media friend of mine go through all from North Carolina through West Virginia, through Southwest Virginia. Like, I didn't think Virginia was going to be competitive. I thought, however, Southwest Virginia, if they're trending him heavily Trump, that was news for him in places like Southeast Ohio, and good news for him in other places like that. And so, consequently, one of the things we found was that if you didn't ask people who they're going to vote for, but instead I started tracking people and saying, okay, what if you feel like or I was telling people, I think a lot of people are just going to go into the voting booth. That's when they're going to make up their mind. And, I think probably people I'm listening are going to probably vote for Trump. And I let my politics off, and particularly working class women would jump all over that answer. Whereas they wouldn't answer they were voting for Trump straight up. They would quickly say, oh, yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. There would be a wait till election day, and probably a lot of them are going to vote for Trump. When you asked it that way, you got a lot more honest answers. And that told me all the other, that the polling is just not capturing it. And then I did a deep dive into the polling itself. And went through the whole history of polling. And I'd done a little bit of this back day. When I was like 15 or 16, I worked on a political campaign, and I asked a political science professor, how is it you just determine, how do polls work? It's like, how you can ask questions to 500 people.
500 people.
Exactly. So tell me how 300 million are thinking. How did that work? And he said, well, Bobby, a poll tells you who answered the poll. And it was the most insightful evidence. I've never got it. I was like, okay. So part art science, but there are a lot of speculation. The art part is in it. And that was back when people actually answered polls. And so for people that don't know, that are watching the polling history, you used to have locally rooted journalists just do a straw poll of their local neighborhood back in the 1890s. There's been betting on politics as long as Americans have had elections. They bet on them all the time. The bookies in Chicago, other places back in the 1800s. But back when you had some competitive races then, and they'd bet on anything. But so it's off of that was your poll to that it was re-reported. Then in the 1930s, Literary Digest came up with a postcard poll. They would send a card poll out to all of their voters. In 1828, they were accurate. They forecast Hoover's big win. So they went and did it again in 1932. But what was unique in 1932 is as a young political science professor, or young political science guy, George Ballot, decided he wanted to get into the polling business, and he thought he could create a scientific basis for measuring public opinion. And so what he did is, instead of a postcard poll, he went door to door. He paid people to go door to door. 1932 split results. The Literary Digest poll said that FDR was going to lose in a landslide.
Big time. And
the Ballot poll said no, FDR was going to win. Though of note, the FDR underestimated. The average Gallup in 1932 underestimated FDR's margin about 19 points. So it gives you an idea of how accurate the poll was. But because of that put it up on the map. They later did research and discovered that the reason why the Digest poll was wrong was not the popular myth that it's because it went to upper middle class people. It's because only the upper middle class people on its audience responded. A lot of it, they had a bunch of. They said if all the people who got the postcard would have answered, then they would have actually been more accurate than Gallup was in forecasting FDR's victory. At 57% of Literary Digest readers actually were planning on voting for FDR. But what was a massive non-response by it. The people who hated FDR were eager to respond. The people fans just didn't think it was necessary, and so didn't. And there was a bit of a class bias that would go throughout polling history to this day, but that some factors have made worse recently.
Is our face red? Is our face? Yeah, this history. This is great. That's great history, and yeah, people just. I guess you got like an Uber mic. People are telling me just move it back a little bit. Just move it back a little bit. I guess you got a super mic, Robert, over there or something. I don't know, but
volume on it as well.
That's good history. People should know that is how George Gallup got on the map. And then, like you said, and I could probably put it. That stuff people would love to read. I'll put the link. I'll find it and I'll put the link. There's a case study, the 1936 Literary Digest poll. What happened? Is our face red or something? However, still there was, despite the response bias, it was still a better, method if you would have had a representative sample. And so that is essentially where, we could kind of dovetail that into this, Robert. Look at Arizona yesterday. Okay. And then even PA, though, after a week of counting, it got a little bit better for Democrats and Biden. It really didn't get much better for Biden. People made hay over how many votes Wells got. But the Bernie vote was big. And then even the Tulsi Gabbard. This primary has been over for months. And it goes to what you were saying about one of your pillars when you bet, the opposition in the party. There is something I'm seeing here, and I guess, and now I'm feeding back on myself a little bit, but there is something I'm seeing here where, look at Arizona, Maricopa. And Arizona, what did Trumpy's got? I think he's up like 2 polls in the last several months in Arizona against Biden. That's it. But if you look inside of these polls, you'll see that the Maricopa electorate is projected to be about even. And we saw last night, even though Democrats voted, the rate was about 2 points higher. The electorate was still I think it's at 4 now. The voter file, Robert, is R5 in Maricopa County. It was amazing what Sinema did because Democrats had 3 days to vote that Republicans did not have in many precincts, plus among other things. But this is the issue. I'm starting. I don't want to get like, I don't want to jump and make some kind of like bold thing here in August. But the bias that's in these polls has to be extreme, even compared to 2016, because a few points can throw you off. I don't know how Ohio Predictive Insights has Biden by like 8 in Maricopa. In this kind of electorate, Robert, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. That's a big miss. That's a big, big miss. And I'm wondering if they thought maybe we're a little too favorable to McSally in 2018. So we're going to not expand our data collection reach, and they're kneecapping themselves a little bit, because you're talking about response bias. I think the desirability bias is real this time. It's bigger. It was real too last time, but it was bigger. It's going to be bigger this time. I already see indicators that it is. And then, of course, just simple response bias because you're not reaching these voters. And I don't know how else you can explain Biden plus 8 in Maricopa County. I don't see it. I'll look now, right now, do the latest look just to tell. But last I saw it was, Republicans were about 50,000 ballots, just in that one race alone. That's a big deal in Arizona, folks. It's not a hugely populous state. That's a big deal. Trump carried Maricopa by 5 points, and he won the state. And that's really what it's going to come down to. They're wrong in Maricopa, Robert. They're wrong in the state. End of story.
Well, no doubt. When I started researching the polling results, aside from recognizing that we've totally changed the mode and method of polling throughout history. Gallup from in-person polling from 1936 all the way through 1968. Then he went live phone polling from that point forward. Then and in that process, you've had people go to use IVR polling, which is automated polling, use online polling data. So all of that, we've changed in the mode. And the biggest thing that's changed is that since 2008, in particular since really 2008, but 2012 accelerated it, your response rate has dramatically declined. That once people no longer had landmines, once people could be put on do not call lists, once people quit responding to public opinion inquiries in general, the scientific part of polling has mostly vanished, and it is mostly art. and the quality of the list dictates the ability of someone to get accurate polling outcome out. So we're to the point now where you look at basically you have IVR polling, you have automated polling, you have text polling, like Data for Progress is doing. You have of course online polling, all of it.
We're doing it too. The text to polling, it's working. It's helping us, Robert, reach some people we would not reach. And they don't want to do live caller, Robert. They don't want to sit on the phone for 20 minutes and talk to us. They don't want to do it.
And then they don't have to worry about the respond for a long time over the internet or anything else. But once that became the case, I mean, Pew admitted this about 10 years ago. They said, everybody's talking about non-response bias issues with an online panel. And then they said, really, it doesn't any difference anymore, because once you get below a 10% response rate, because the whole, for those people audience that may not have the whole background, the scientific part of polling for live phone polling was that you had random selection.
Yep.
You had enough people answer the poll, and you would just randomly dial numbers. That was sort of the scientific part of it, if you will. Once people quit answering, then all of a sudden you have an issue of we may have a bias at who answers the call. Mm-hmm. Disproportionately this group or that group. And that's the non-response bias issue. And that issue goes through the roof once you're no longer in a position to have adequate response. And that happened really only, it's starting to happen in 2004 and 2008, but it really didn't take off until really after 2012. But up to 2012, like even Gallup was using mostly landlines call.
Yeah.
It didn't shift until never doing almost all phone polling, live polling. I mean, it's also 50 times more expensive now than it used to be to do a live phone poll. That's why you're seeing even CNBC is using groups like Chain, other groups, because they don't want to pay the price of a live phone poll. I
try to tell people that there's a bit of a I don't know, like a club, Robert, like it's a
the other factor, when I started digging in the polling data, what was fascinating was especially 2016, it got worse. Because I had apples to apple comparisons, and there's these constant comparisons. They're just apples to apples. Yeah, and so you're comparing different pollsters using different methodologies, using different modes, using different weighting techniques, and that's why polling has mostly through most parts of the world. Other than your polling, other than the French poll, and the French have to go by this real strict standard. Which, interestingly enough, comes closer to your methodology than the one all the Nate Silvers of the world like.
That's right.
The French, it's all online, and they do a lot of post-stratification and careful weighting by geography, by a class, by other cultural indicators of groups. Even Obama's people admitted that's what they were doing in 2012. They weren't doing broad polls. We want 350 of this little group in this particular part of the state, because if we got that, we got the rest right. While Ron's people were doing these generic BS polls that had him thinking he was all the way through election night. He was like John Kerry in 2000. What did with Massachusetts losers? He and John Kerry were all in 2004. I made tons of cash that night, so I can't complain away. Made money in 2012 too. Obama did have his utility from conservative friends. But yes, when I dug in, the polling is now almost all art outside of a small group of people. I came across people's punt because when researching polls, your 2004 analysis was the only one that was accurate that was out there. Because state polling was atrocious in 2014. People forget 2016 wasn't debut. There was double-digit errors all over the place, especially in the South. But we started noticing a trend wherever. So I really dug into Pew's polls because I'll give credit. They're transparent. They'll give you all of the underlying data. And if you go back to 2016, there was one group that Pew kept missing. I don't think they got them wrong. I think that they just couldn't find them.
Couldn't get them.
And they were non-college, non-Hispanic, non-evangelical, white voters, particularly in rural and small towns and ex-urban areas. Everywhere. Because the group that they got, like almost every group, when they did a voter file validated poll later, where they went back and double-checked to the who voted, so and so forth, they had made two mistakes. One, of course, underestimated the working class share of vote. But they were not as backseat as others were that. People still forget. Like when I hear these, let's focus on suburban moms. I know who the media is talking about, and they're talking about actual suburban mom swing voter. They're talking about a college-educated,
right,
non-evangelical woman living in a $500,000 home or above, and that voter group. First of all, that's about 4% of the entire electorate. Smaller swing states, and all of them for Hillary already. There's only a tiny share. I know a few of them for Trump. They're not budget anyway. The suburban, like I always love to tell. How many people know, though, that if you live in a trailer park, it's considered part of suburbia by census standards. So your suburban mom is going to, that could be a swing voter, a working middle class waitress mom. It's who the husband ran out. It's that kind of story. It's been bad happening in the working class white community in manufacturing areas, mining areas, like it had African American community where there's a huge amount of parental absence and moms are left taking care of kids by themselves. And the kind of voters that swing back and forth for when they're evangelical. They're evangelical. They're with Trump.
They're sticking. They're sticking. Yeah.
Evangelical votes not budging. But you get into it, the more so that we're like, and I like to test things. Is can I predict it? And I can use preview versions of that. And so one of the ways that I did in 2016 was I wrote down what I thought this results would be. And I thought, based on this belief that working class whites were being missed in a lot of polls, particularly working class white Trump supporters, basically. They were predicting class whites would vote for Trump by 20.
Yeah.
Voted for Trump by 5 points.
Yeah.
It turned out it was one group, particular school-educated whites, who make up half of the working. Like the other thing that's being misled in a lot of the polls we're seeing now is that all they'll do is non-college and college. They won't tell you what share is high school educated amongst non-college, and that's half of the electorate in key swing states amongst white voters. And they won't tell you how many are post-college amongst the college-educated share. And there's a big gap between post-college vote and college voters. And there's an even bigger gap if you separated out your Ivy League from your online school. Like the polling that we were talking about doing is trying to come up with really good ways to identify the true swing votes and recognize because the key swing vote for Trump, just like 2016, it's going to be the same in 2020. It's going to be northern working class whites who are not evangelical, many of whom have only a high school degree, who fundamentally were like Trump. But it wasn't the pandemic that caused him problems with most of that group. Some working class women, but it was his response and allowing governors to do what they did.
To just stomp on the economy, right? This is what I think. I'm becoming more and more of a cynic as time goes on. I really am. I never saw Trump's approval pop the way the media polls showed when he was doing the daily coronavirus briefings and gave covers to the local officials. And then I would see Fox News like, oh, it's the highest since inauguration. And the hell are you talking about? 20% of his base is pissed off, and I feel like I really don't know what else to say, Robert. They fudged him to get him to do it. Because they know flattery works on Donald Trump. I'm sorry. I normally don't make accusations like that, but it was not remotely representative of what we saw. Trump's voters did not want that to happen.
Particularly, what 2016 showed, which 2014 had previewed, that you had documented, what that polling was no longer, I put it as polling went from art, half science to mostly art, and artists are all bad at it. But it's more politically egregious because it started happening in 2016. It got worse after 2016 because I track not only what media organization is doing a poll, who's doing the poll for them. And CNN had ORD for a long time doing their poll, Opinion Research Center. And they actually were deep pollsters. They had those limitations, but like they would when they had a poll that showed Trump up, they released it, and some media organizations had buried it.
Yeah,
giveaway people. Most of these polling media companies are on a schedule for polls. When you suddenly see a poll not be reported, it was supposed to be on schedule to be reported, it isn't because the poll was out. It's because the poll came back and they don't like the response.
Yeah, they tanked it.
Exactly, and they're doing that all the time in 2026 because I figured out what the schedule was, and to see this disappears, like, oh, it must mean Trump did well that week.
Yeah. And in 2018 too, CNN tanked their final with Andrew Gillum. They had the Gillum plus 12, and then it was not. It vanished. 12 points vanished in a week, Robert. They killed the poll.
CNN can the Opinion Research Center after 2016 because they didn't like the fact they released any pro-Trump polls.
I know.
They have the same organization out of Pennsylvania gathers data, a lot of the media companies. So they're doing their own data basically. There's no real pollster on top of them doing meaningful weighting, and that's why their numbers have got like Rasmussen took
way off now.
Oh, I mean, their midterm number was 14 or 12, whatever it was, double digits almost entire time. The thing I always recommend to people also is the way I was surprised at the polling community's ability when the official political science organizations did a mass study about why 2016 polls were so bad. I thought that the so-called political data journalists would be honest, but they were not.
It was very discouraging, man.
Elliott and Morris. They also said, polling was really accurate, and just the pundits got wrong. So that's why you said there's a 98% chance, a 9% chance, 98% at Huffington Post, 9% chance at the New York Times, between 70 and 80% with Silver, 70 to 80% with Harry, and 70 to 80% with Elliott Morris. That's why you predicted that, because you can interpret the poll well. But purportedly so. But if you dug in, I always tell people on the eve of the election polls when you're looking at past polls, because one, we're not on the eve of the election, but second, they always heard, and when they get nervous, and it's so obvious,
they get scared and they heard.
Yeah, I mean, hurting in general now. It's as a point you raised a couple of days ago. In a normal polling environment, when you have more than 25 polls, at least one of them should be completely off the rest.
That's right.
Just because that's 5% error rate.
What happened? What happened to the outlier rule, Robert? It vanished in 2016. If it was true, then we would have seen an outlier, and we didn't. And not just nationally, but in the states. And then also, if you take out, because they all that argument that they made that the polls really weren't wrong. If you take out the pollsters they hate, Robert, and they don't think are good pollsters who should even be in RCP's average, then they were even farther off. So
because what I did is I removed all the eve election polls, go back, and if you look at it, and I also factor out a tendency to include these herded averages, RCP. Yeah. The problem is RCP is using different pollsters and using different mode polling is past herding examples. So the way to approach it is to just look at the media polls, just look at the university polls that are polled with the same method. And when you do that average, what you end up with is they predicted that Hillary would win the national vote by 8. And they're off by 6 points nationally on average, the Media University poll in 2016. And they were off by about 7-8 points statewide polls in the West. And then the number of various states. So because it's hard, because even now one for that is evangelicals vote as a group regardless of socioeconomic status for the most part. If you're a church-going evangelical, it doesn't matter whether you have a college degree or a high school degree, you're going to be pretty close in your voting degree.
That's why we did the religiosity index.
Polling is it's always had a problem. Like you go back and look, when there's big class divides in the electorate, that's when polling error has been at a very high rate. Throughout the 30s and before Truman, Gallup was still missing a whole bunch of working-class voters. And so his average, back and looked, I was looking at the biggest errors that occurred in history. Comparing average polls to final results. And what's fascinating is the scope of some is just like massive. For FDR in 1936, the average Gallup poll got the margin wrong by 19 points. Because that's how bad it was. And yet it was the most accurate in 1936. In 1948, it underestimated the average poll throughout the election, not just the worst poll. The worst poll, there's 20-plus point polling errors every single presidential election that anyone has ever polled since 1936. But these are taking the average of all the polls taken during election season, comparing it to the March. They got Truman wrong by 14 points. They got in 1964, they overestimated LBJ by 16 points. That was the first time probability bias, I think, really popped up.
Sure.
Then in 1976, average poll overestimated Carter's margin by 10 points. In 1980, They underestimated Reagan an average of 16 points. And then, of course, you have errors of between 6 to 10 points all the way through, and including like people who the biggest deficit when they were like, oh, no one come back ever for 10-point deficit.
Yeah, this late
like, where are they coming from? Harry Truman came back from a 10-point deficit. Well, to some degree, Hubert Humphrey came back down by 15, ended up making it a close race. Ronald Reagan came back from a 29-point deficit. People forget Reagan was down by 30 points throughout 1980, and they even know all the polls, because what happened was mostly it was just gap from 1936 to 1976. In 1980, the networks decided to get involved, but they were afraid to release a lot of polls because they didn't know how good they were. ABC was calling it Carter all the way through. So I've seen people, they're coming up with fake numbers. Whoever, like you see Harrington and other people saying, oh, Carter was down throughout the key time. Carter was almost never down. It was down for a very brief time period around the Republican convention in 1980. Other than that, Carter had the lead all the way through. Nobody thought Reagan was going to win, and then he won by almost 10. He did win by 10 points. So that's how bad the poll was all the way through that election cycle. 1984 in the summer, ABC, I did like the news search. ABC had Mondale up at key point through the summer, and that election was never close. Reagan won by 20 or so. Now, of course, 1988, the famous 17-point error. And it wasn't just people. I'm seeing people say, oh, that was an invention poll. No, there were 4 different polls that had to caucus up by 5 more.
Absolutely.
Bill Clinton was often down by 15 points in 1992. So this idea of big deficit never happened before. This is just the data. The problem is that we were analyzing the data. Now, it's for me, unfortunately, a lot of big whales with a lot of cash that love to bet politics. You listen to these schmucks. So I told people I'm going to have to give kickback to Nate Silver if I win big this time. I never thought I would get it 2016 all over again. I mean, I got Brexit and I got a couple of UK elections, and the French elections went well for me. I wasn't a Macron fan to forecast that outcome early on. But given the nature of the French, very urban voter group. I always tell people, don't understand Europe. Continental Europe votes more like New York State. Because the urban metropolises are much more dominant than here in America. America votes more like would vote. Much more rural, much smaller town, manufacturing, etc. So so we dig really into the polling data, which none of I was curious, how does the New York Times have a 14-point lead? And I'll give him credit. He's very transparent. He's
trying.
Data.
He's trying. I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. Yeah.
But what he ignored, I was like, okay, what I'm curious about is, I start off looking at 2020, saying, okay, how many voters are either not going to turn out or not for him? How many Hillary voters are either not going to turn out or not vote for Biden? Then of the third-party independent candidates, are they going to break to the two parties in an aggressive way? And are there going to be a lot of voters compared to some lost old voters? And so I'm curious, because to me, if as long as Trump's holding his base, and Biden's about the same with Hillary's base, then you should have a close election. Unless the third party, even if the 30s, this is about 6 points made up amongst the third party. Well, most of the polls show they're sticking third party. The only group breaking off is some libertarians breaking toward Trump. That people who voted for Johnson. And one of the other, like I tell, follow TV ratings, politics is downstream from culture, like Andrew Breitbart said. If Black Lives Matter was a popular movement, truly popular movement in working class America, NBA ratings and Major League Baseball ratings skyrocketing like PGA ratings are right now. Not. In fact, they're losing about 20% of their market share. And the guys I follow a guy like Tim Pool, because that's a guy who didn't vote for Trump, still don't like Trump personally.
Left-wing guy.
Left-wing guy. Tell everybody left-wing guy.
Yeah.
Follow Dave Rubin, libertarian leaner, but not a Trump fan. Tim Pool did not vote for Trump in 2016. Dave Rubin did not vote for Trump in 2016. Joe Rogan, another sort of a good cultural bellwether of a certain kind of mindset, he didn't vote for Trump in 2016. Endorsed Bernie in 2020. And Clay Travis also didn't vote for him in 2016. Big sports analyst, top sports radio station in the country. All 4 of those guys are talking like they're going to vote Trump in 2020. So that's a sign that something is happening in what you're seeing in the polls.
Leo Terrell, Robert. Could you ever have a man? Now, you're a lawyer. Come on. How long have you known of Leo Terrell? Would you ever have imagined that this? I mean, he got, for people who have never followed Leo's career, He has been a left-wing civil rights activist for as long as I can remember. And that is, I feel like they're hyper-focused on those, their definition of suburban voters, like you were just talking about before. They're hyper-focused on them, and others are leaking out, and they don't see them. Because if you look at Pennsylvania, that's another great example. They're, Montgomery, Delaware, Bucks. These are the people they focus on, people who live there that are more fortunate, right?
Yeah.
And while it's true that Democrats have made gains in those areas, the net statewide is a loss because Joe Biden is not making any inroads with those voters that we were talking about before, those working class voters who, by the way, liked Obama. They voted for Obama. I mean, technically casted a vote for Biden because they were at that ticket. There was justice also, too. I just want to add this when we were talking about the methods that they missed, and because everybody goes back and does an autopsy. And I wanted to know, it wasn't really for us, it wasn't an autopsy, but we wanted to know what we did right. That question, which I will say now because it's over, I can say it now. I wouldn't have told people before, but it was really 2 questions about voting history, which we compared then if we could find them in the voter file. And did you vote in the last 10 years in a federal, or statewide or local election? That group who were no's, and they were workers, and they basically felt like the system didn't work. It didn't matter who you voted for. It was either going to be a Clinton or a Bush, and they were going to screw you. And that was it, right? So they didn't care. Those voters, all of those other pollsters were basically, they were screening them out. Yep. And we knew, they told us they are extremely enthusiastic. If you looked at their vote history, they would not have been really considered likely voters. And he was crushing her with them. And they were disproportionately in battleground states. The area of the country where Sean Trendy wrote about after, remember the case of the missing white voter? That's where these people were popping up. Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. And we're like, oh, man. Yeah,
ended up doing an autopsy sort of after Obama won as to I was like, I wonder why some of these too simple metrics work. Is there other evidence of that? And one of the things that I recognized and found was that it's a matter of who's going to vote. And what you find is that extreme enthusiasm is a better measurement than a lot of other measurements. So like what it was is the polls may have actually been skewed in favor of Obama. Yeah. If the electorate had looked like polling electorate. But what it was is if one figured out that African-American voters were going to be as high as 15% of the national vote, and that's even more disproportionate in certain states, and they were looking at something like 97, 98%, I mean, unprecedented African-American unity, then you realize that was a lot of white voters Romney had up for. And I was fascinated when I went back and contrasted to what Sean Trent put up, which was there was a massive drop-off of working class whites 2008 to 2012. In places like South Philly, places like sort of hard-scrap areas outside of Pittsburgh, across the board. There are a lot of people, what Obama did is he professionally, what they kept trying to interpret as a race reaction was never a race reaction. It was a class reaction.
Yeah, that's right.
Obama being black, right. He never gets nominated. He never gets elected. He never wins re-election. But the reason why he had rebellion against him had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with class. It was the professional class started. Obama remade the Democratic Party into a professional class party. People with post-college degrees, people in the education fields, the media fields, legal fields like that, the sort of a pedantic field, if you will, and a polling field overwhelmingly dominated by liberals and the left.
Absolutely. I can attest to that, man, firsthand. It is dominated by liberals. There is no doubt.
That's where if Nate Dover was sincere at all, he would hire he would have on Trendy, who's only a little bit to the right. I mean, no one will confuse Sean with being pro-Trump.
Right.
I have a lot of fun emails that someday I'll share. But
me too.
about some of the dates I have with Sean. But Sean's a great guy. I've known him for 12 years. He's done him college at Yale. A collar guy, blue guy. And now and then he'll stick his up a little bit. He'll say, well, maybe it's not as bad as you guys say it is. And he'll get shellacked, which I find funny. I was like, he's just pushing the needle a little back. Because everybody at 38 is to the left. Everybody at Uptake at Times is to the left. Everybody at CNN is to the left. Everybody at even at Fox, data people now are all to the left.
They are
conservative data people up there anymore. That's why they're getting. Now this time, I think their results are going to really embarrass them, because I think you're right. They're going to push the envelope. I don't even think they'll try to herd to make it toward the end. I think they'll do a little of it, but I think that they create an electorate and then justify themselves, still misunderstand 2018.
They didn't herd.
And their polls in 2018 were right, when in fact something ahistorical happened in 2018, which was that incumbency became consequential. So that was a shock. I'm very curious whether that's sustainable. That's the first time in the history of congressional midterm that you basically got almost no bonus points for being an incumbent.
Yeah.
And you even got no bonus points if you've been around for 20 years. The irony was the only people who got any bonus points were people with connections to working class Democrats on the Democratic side. So Joe Manchin in West Virginia gets bonus.
A little boost, yeah.
Congressman from Western Minnesota gets bonus points. But interesting is even your average Democrat saw very little incumbents bonus themselves. That was part of why the Senate polls were a joke 2018, just like they did 2014. Now that made money in London, because I'll give you Donnelly, the Democrat from Indiana, was still a favorite in the markets, which was a joke. Missouri. Was a joke. I mean, it was just one thing after the next. Florida, Scott was a substantial underdog. I had to wait forever to have that. Wait there for a month for that to clear. But because thank God Broward County didn't rediscover 100,000 new ballots. This is what now going to your people have been asking me a lot about mail-in balloting and trying to explain. It's exactly like absentee balloting, except without any of the safeguards.
That's right.
For absentee balloting.
That's the difference.
It's harder to get a candidate on the ballot in Nevada. It's harder to recall the governor in Nevada than it is to vote in the presidential election coming up in Nevada. It makes no sense. Petition circulating is supposed to be easier than voting, but in fact, it's harder. There's verification mechanisms for circulating a petition in Nevada right now than there is for voting in Nevada. And I mean, I live in Nevada. I get 2 voter ballots myself. And by the way, they've been doing this for a while. I had to ask for a ballot, but really not, because they've been sending them to me and 3 other people who no longer live here for a while. But that's Harry Reid machine. I mean, the reason why his 2010 ended up off, but it might not have been because the poll was off. If you know Harry Reid, maybe it turns out he cut a deal with the aliens, so you understand how it all worked. It's like the life. But I think you dig into the polling data, they're still missing work. Like Pew, for example, where they were off in 2016 was they underestimated Trump's share of the working class white vote by 15 points. The polling is doing it in almost all of the polls, and it's because they miss high school-aided votes, in part because they don't weigh, in part because they're tough to poll. Because a lot of them are landline, and unless you're using multiple modes like you are, certain voter groups you're not going to get. Some people are only reachable by text. Some people are only reachable by online. Some people are only reachable by landline. Some people are only reachable or will only respond to an automated poll, will not respond to a live poll. Now, I agree with you. Desirability bias is getting off the charts. Because, I mean, you have high school teachers get fired for what they post on Facebook. You got warehouse getting fired for what they post on social media.
God forbid USA Today quote you in their story when they run like so-and-so Rich Barris of whatever, Florida. God forbid, you're done, folks. You're done. And
absolutely. In an environment, polls are going to be really bad. But going to the New York Times poll, I was shocked to discover something that Cohen had not talked about at all. I looked at his Harry vote share and his Trump vote share. And he has a slight difference there. I'm not quite buying the difference that Biden's people have better loyalty amongst Hillary voters than Trump has amongst his own voters. Even assuming that's the case, that could only explain going from a 2-point Biden lead to 4-point Biden lead.
Yeah.
How do they get to 14 points? Well, they have 20% of the vote group of 20 voters, people who did not vote 2016. That's insane. We're not going to have 20% new voters. And like that, he gave it away in another thread. Cohn admitted, he said, well, unaffiliated independent voters are disproportionately young and non-white. And I'm like, maybe, I was like, hold on a second. So now are you taking what will show us, say, with heavy partisan registration, Pennsylvania or Florida? There you may find unaffiliated voters are disproportionately people didn't take the time to register, and that will be non-white young. But that's not independent voter profile. Your independent, your self-identification independent voter profile is more working class white than it is anything else.
And regionally, Robert, those are the people who will talk to you on a live caller. That's the difference. That's what and Fox, same thing at Fox. I mean, that's where you're getting these big, disparities. It just, if you're not going to try to reach out to these other people anyway, it doesn't matter how much you gather in those particular regions. You cannot extrapolate out, which is why you'll miss on how, the margins where the support is for Trump and just Republicans in generally. You'll see their polls are generally in rural. There's, Fox, they'll say rural, 55-45 or something, or 55-40. On election day, it's 70-30, 75-25. And they're never, it's disappointing because, after post 2016, you would think they would say, well, maybe let's figure this out. Let's work this out. But they didn't. They apologized for themselves and then just continued to move on. And if you look at Nate's, and again, I will applaud him because at least he's trying to be transparent. He is, at least. And the live polling idea is something I've wanted to do for a long time. It's a very cool idea. I just don't have, the New York Times. They'll give him what he wants, right? That's a big difference.
People have to realize these days, to 1,000 people in a phone poll, that's going to cost you at least $50,000.
That's right. People don't get it, man.
Exactly. It's brutally expensive. And what's fascinating is it's increasingly evident campaigns or smaller campaigns are no longer even doing live phone anymore.
That's right.
You can't afford it.
And Schmidt from Google told, and we got those emails from WikiLeaks, speaking about having emails that would be great, one day they'd be a story. Google, where's the Google consumer surveys now, right? Schmidt told Hillary Clinton in those emails, these polls are garbage or, basically archaic, and that you need to online, find these other voters, try to reach them online. And Google consumer surveys are gone. They basically disconnect. I have emails from them too. There's like the one conservative somewhere in the corner cubicle who emails and says, we're ending those on October 28th. Stay strong. You know what I mean? Stay strong. Don't buckle. I got others from Nielsen, Robert, hey there.
Best poll experiments was the USC LA Times poll.
Yeah, it was a great experiment.
They had argued back in 2012, and they had the data reported.
Right.
I instinctually avoid. Another part of my political is that I believe voters make up their mind a year in advance. They just don't always know they've made up that. They haven't consciously processed that necessarily, but it shows up in their behavior. It shows up in whether somebody challenges the incumbent. It shows up in how they pick the opposition. It shows up in a range of other data and statistics. It will also show up in voter affiliation, extreme enthusiasm in polling data, in voter registration, in consumer habits and cultural trends. But what's useful was USC's argument and a lot of political science that is good data, is that the variability is pretty small. That a lot of people who say they're either undecided may really lean a certain direction, but may not want to discuss this. Some people have kind of made up their mind, but they're going to just wait until election day to verbalize it. But that for the most part, real variability in polls should be within the margin of error, with also an outlier poll every 25 polls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they were and tested that, and actually that's what happened with their USC polling. They're the only to show a Trump lean throughout the entire election, and their average I think was almost only off by points. Their average poll ended up being high if you factored all the polls out through summer and through the fall. But it was interesting, but they're not a polling yet. So a whole people who were Republican-oriented, Rasmussen's results are now mostly not included in a lot of the presidential results on RCP and other averages. Remington is not doing it. as much publishing as far I've seen. You don't have Republican-leaning pollsters that have existed in the past, so it's going to skew the averages. The other factors, I think because problems with inherent problems they're exacerbated, combined with here's the reality. You're a pollster for a major media station. The only mistake you'd make is showing Trump doing better than he is.
Yep.
You not get fired if you underestimate Trump.
That'll cost you the contract.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the reality.
If you keep your contract, you know what your job is. Burying any polling results that are good Trump, skew the weighting however you need to show whatever narrative they want to have at the time, and that's it. And that's what's going to continue to happen. But if you look at under like one of the data points, I look at voter registration trends and look at voter affiliation, self-identification, and Gallup Pew because they disclose a lot of underlying data. So Gallup is now not polling anywhere near as much as they used to on this. What's fascinating is both of those trends have been largely Republican. Now, people got hyped about when I see some weird number where all of a sudden Gallup goes from about even to plus 15 Democrat. That just tells me they got an outlier poll. That's how they're doing honest polling. They're doing us reporting. I don't take that outlier as actually being accurate. If you look, I went and I dug into the Pew data, and what's fascinating is who's trending which way. It's the only group trending Democratic is upper middle class, professional class, post-college degree white voters. Every other group at certain levels is trending either even or Republican. And in particular, what was interesting to me was the people who have been starting to talk about it in the polls about the Mexican-American, Cuban-American, Hispanics trending much more for Trump in 2020 than they were in 2016. It's actually shown up in voter affiliation polls by Pew.
Yeah, as well. It is.
And particularly, my guess is it's not necessarily Puerto Ricans. If I were to guess, my guess is it's Cubans and Mexicans and maybe some Cubans. It's just a hunch, Puerto Ricans, but you would know that a little bit better in Florida because there's a decent population.
Yeah, the Puerto Rican increase for the support, just I would say approval. Interestingly, Cuban Americans are this is what I mean. Maybe other people have other data, but in our data, Cuban Americans are the strongest, or I would say I'd characterize them as the most loyal Trump voter. If you are a Cuban Republican or a Cuban independent leaning Republican, which is, of course, the majority. Look, Romney did not do that well among them, and they haven't budged at all. And there's even been when, I'm not sure there's been any leakage. I'm just thinking when you take a state like Ohio, those people were very hard for us to reach. And even our polling in Ohio underestimated Trump. We knew he was going to win. We just did not know it was going to be 9 points. That was because sometimes those Southeastern, like you were talking about traditionally, historically Democrat areas, white working class, sometimes they talked to us and sometimes they didn't. So that's what happened to us. I talked
before Pennsylvania, and they were saying that was more sincere pollster, one to get results. He said there's a certain part of the state I just can't reach consistently at all.
It's hard. It's very difficult.
It's just prohibitively expensive for me to try to get to them.
And those Puerto Ricans in the I-4 corridor, which killed Mitt Romney, they hurt Republicans, in the last couple of election cycles in Florida. They actually saved Ron. So I was wondering whether or not I'm seeing this increase in approval for Trump. Is it real? Well, 2018 comes along. They saved Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott because we stopped focusing on Hillsborough County 4 cycles ago. The media's stuck in 2004. They really are, right? Yeah. In 2004. And Pinellas in 2016, it was Pinellas. And we knew it was going to be Pinellas. But 2018 rolls around. And they actually lose Pinellas by just a little bit, but they held on for a couple of reasons. One, the big ones, and even Monroe too. There was slippage in Monroe, but they held on because one, they got huge turnout, and this was pro-Trump, turnout. Collier County, Lee, Collier was just gangbuster. I've never seen turnout like that ever. Bay County was hurt by the hurricane, yet still managed to get a nice chunk. Not as good as they could have done, but a nice chunk. And then along the I-4 corridor, DeSantis and Scott did so much better among those Hispanics. That's where the Puerto Rican population is in this state. And that's what people don't understand. That's why we always oversay. You have to, I don't want to tell people to throw it in the garbage can.
But if you don't see a poll in Florida with a Latino detail question and at least some indication that they have oversampled Hispanics, Robert, I wouldn't release it because I would not be confident in it.
It's like where you've got very different Hispanic voter groups. That's Americans up near the border. You got Puerto Ricans in the state, and you got Cubans, and no Cubans. You got Venezuelans and
Venezuelans. Yeah, very pro-Trump.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of people who are communism or socialist regimes of some type, leftist regimes. That's right. Who have, I'll be very curious how they react to the rise of BLM, the rise of Antifa. That group. If I was on the Democratic side, I would have totally suppressed those people right away. I would have sort of smacked them in the face and buried them. No way I let them get light. And the media's willingness to gaslight for them is just off the charts. And we always go back to a couple of things. One is aside from these institutional factors that I look, long-term trends, all the individual data. I hope they do some countywide polling like we got in 2016.
Yeah, that was great. That was
right now we're getting in that. We're not getting the USC style polling. We're not getting Remington style. We're getting a little bit of not Remington, but the other group that did a good job, the Midwest, who to their credit is willing to gamble again because they're going to get
Trafalgar.
Yeah,
Cahaley.
Because they know if the media is going to make a huge example out of him.
Yep.
The media is going to give them no credit. So it's a huge gamble for them to stick their name out there and say, by the way, everybody's wrong about the Midwest right now. Because they have Pennsylvania competitive, Wisconsin competitive. So the see if that continues to translate. But the other fact to look at is just think about your ordinary, everyday swing voter. Your voter who, and by swing I mean maybe they'll vote, maybe they won't, maybe they'll vote Trump, maybe they'll vote somebody else. That voter group is disproportionately blue collards in the Midwest.
Yes.
And in the North. And when they're sitting at the bar, I always look at the issue with, is that an issue that's going to resonate with them sitting at the bar? And there's no way that we're worrying about Black Lives Matter is not motivating them to vote Democrat. That's for sure. And I always tell people, I'll tell my friends on the left, this script has happened before. It's 1968. And what there's somebody that northern working class people didn't like at all in just 4 years before 1964, George Corley-Wallace, as represented in their very anti-water vote amongst the northern Catholic working class 64. By 1968, one out of every four working-class white guys in outside a major city was voting George Corley-Wallace for president of the United States. And that's because they were so. I tell people, if you want to see a preview for this, go back to Wallace's speech. Wallace's speech has shifted from race to culture. He started talking about pointy-headed intellectuals. He's the one who came up with that. Pointy-headed. He's the one who said, got a couple of 4 words for the folks with long hair: WWORA and SOP. Going back to cars, back then they were like this: get in front of people's cars. In front of Nixon car, stopped it. And Wallace said, well, if you get down in front of my car, it's the last car you're going to lay down in front of. It was uber macho, and Trump tries to get like a lighter version of us. He's nowhere all the way there, but he's been bowing from bits and pieces of it because he actually remembers 68 and 72.
He's harkening back to it. You could see he's trying to what's the word?
In the Law and Order reference, and the tough guy images, and he's trying to get his the biggest problem Trump has, aside from going along with any lockdowns of any sale that killed his incredible economic success. Lowest unemployment for every working class group by ethnicity or geography in our history. I mean, incredible numbers he was getting. African American employment, Latino unemployment numbers most people thought could not bring down to those levels, and without major inflation, he did. And he went from plus 20, plus 25 on the economy to now being just about even with Biden the economy.
Yep.
And that's solely because that's his only point. He's just got to get enough of the economic. Now, good news for him is even when in these polls that have doubtful weighting, even in those, he's still ahead of Biden. When people ask, who do you think has the best shot to get the economy back up and going?
To bring it back.
And so I think that's going to be back, law and order. Biden is a senile guy that's going to have nut jobs run the office. The combination of, it's going to be McGovern Eagle Really nice. Eagle. I mean, because remember, Eagle today gave him the ticket because he was nuts. He had the electric shock treatment, and then McGovern was going to have all the crazy people around him. So it was a combination of incompetency and insanity. That's a good way to brand Biden. If he gets base back, my view is, other than him going his mistake going along lockdowns, his other biggest mistake is still staffing. His campaign team's a joke. There's nobody on his campaign team I would hire. Nobody. Now I would hire Karen inside the White House for a job, but she's most inside the White House. He should move her over to the campaign because his press secretary does just fine. So move her back campaign type role, and bring it doesn't have to be Ben. Because Bannon was wrong on the lockdown. He helped push nonsense. But it has to be someone like Bannon. And Stephen is a speechwriter. He's not a political strategist. He's not a campaign TV ad maker. He's not a TV ad purchaser. And especially when big tech's shutting down what they do in terms of targeted advertising. I mean that's the other big risk. Biggest number one for Trump: can the economy rebound in time for people to believe it and not talk down? 2, can he hire somebody competent on his team to help? He cannot be the only populist in his whole campaign. It's when he was running for office, he could get away with that. But if it wasn't, he would lie and say it was just him. But in reality, he had Sam Nunberg, he had Roger Stone, he had a lot of people with good, deep political instincts.
And to ground him in when he would to keep him in that. Now he's in office though, and it's a different kind of thing, Robert.
Exactly. He can't be by himself. Even they had at least something around him. Now he's got nobody, and you're isolated in the White House, where the only thing he reads is Twitter. So I mean, thank God there's a populist voice on Twitter, because otherwise Trump would have no clue what's happening in the country at all. I don't think. Yeah. I think you're totally disconnected,
insulated.
Absolutely. But the third problem is big tech. Big tech is going to manipulate the election like nothing ever before. They're already preventing him from running ads that he likes. They're going to do more stuff, and they're going to do everything possible. And I believe there's aspects of 2018's results that are only consistent with big tech manipulating acts of the election results. They already knew.
They did that. The app for what is it? The Play Store, stand, whatever, newsstand or whatever it is. We have never been fact-checked, Robert. Never have we ever been There has never been a story on People's Pundit Daily that has been factually inaccurate, that somebody has said, PolitiFact somebody. We are not the Palmer Report. The only thing we ever did, the only sin we ever committed, was without permission run a tracking poll that was more accurate than other people. And that is what we did wrong. And they got they sick their hack gurus on us to smear us, and they got their big tech people to ban us, and we're not even, we're in Google News, which is crazy. We're a news publisher, but they have us in the fact checking index. And yet they would ban us. Now, what does that tell you, folks? They accept you when you go through the review process, which you need to do. Facebook too. They accept you, but they underhand, they do things behind closed doors, and they underhandedly ban you from their applications. Why wouldn't they remove us from the index if we were fake news, Robert? Why they don't? Because they know that they were hoping nobody would leak that crap to James O'Keefe. And that's how I found out. I found out through James O'Keefe's whistleblower. I had no idea. They still respond to us every day. Here, got a new fact check. Oh, thanks, Rich. Have a great day. They are the most dishonest pieces of trash I have ever seen in my life.
Well, I mean, I only have a very small presence on Facebook, Barnes Law, and I have like 5,000-6,000 people who follow me. I don't make a big push. It's other social media. Twitter's my main one.
Me too.
And right now, if I put anything up, I get the 100 people will actually see it of my own 5,000 subscribers. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna boost one of the interviews with someone else I was doing. Like, I'm gonna see what's happening. I'm gonna pay like $100 just to make sure everybody in my 1,000 subscriber list sees it. They disallowed the ad. So I was like, hold on a second. I'm just to my own people that you guys set this up for to know it's something happening. And that's how, and I was like, okay, if that bad for someone that's got a small site playing around it, that they're suppressing. And that tells me the broader scale. And then you combine that with what they've been able to do to Alex Jones. because the loudest talk radio voice that has the big overlap with the northern white working class swing voter is Alex Jones. That's pro-Trump. And now he's completely off the platform that exists. You can't even say his name on Facebook. You can't even say it without asking being banned. You can't say it on Instagram without risk of it being banned. And what ironic is what triggered the final cue for all of this was Jones, to his credit, was one of the first people to come out and point out that he thought Biden had some sort of dementia. And when I first heard it, I thought, well, maybe that's Alex being out, Alex having a little fun, maybe a little exaggeration in there. And then I watched, I was like, no, he actually understated the case. I was like, because I've been watching Biden since the 80s.
Yeah.
But, I'm gonna have my nephew and some other people. We're gonna make some little ads with. It's when Joe Biden, 1988, said, "I've done dumb things. I'll do dumb stuff again." And so it's gonna play that around every single screw up he's ever create like 50 different ads. So at least one thing people know is Joe Biden. I'm dumb, and I'll continue to be dumb. But I mean, I remember he was quick on his. He was a quicker. He was slow. The Biden people seeing today is nothing like Biden had his problems that he would say politically incorrect things that were too blunt, but not for. He was quick of wit. I mean,
he wasn't like an intellectual, but he was witty and he could have snaps.
Irish verbiosity that helped them develop political dominance in so many of these cities in America.
I think he crushed Paul Ryan in the vice presidential debate.
Yeah,
I think and now I just want to play something. It's really short. This is now Joe Biden. I mean, this was not a joke, and he tried to make it a joke. You know what I'm going to play?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Kingswood Community Center. Actually, that's the one down I used to work. As a joke. You didn't know where we were. Anyway, it's great to be here. And
that was not a joke, Robert.
Oh, especially you see that shock look on his face midway through. Somebody's staring back at him like, no, dislocation. I remember that was classic. I mean, when you have Joe Rogan, who truly is not a partisan guy, saying this guy's obviously senile, and why do we want to look for a senile person president? Then you know the scale of it. Now, I think, what's interesting is him playing the I don't want to debate card. If that's sincere, I think it is sincere but I think it's because large parts of his team think that he could only lose, he couldn't win by participating in a debate.
I totally agree.
Bernie, a lot of people thought he would collapse in a debate. He didn't. I think if they limit it to one or two debates, they can put some kind of drug, like whatever they put Hillary on, and he can probably last without making a major flaw. I think they misread his
little Kennedy booster.
Exactly.
Little Kennedy booster.
John Kennedy drugged up like John Kennedy looks so good against Nixon. Nixon's up there sweating. Kennedy's totally cool because they dosed up with like half a dozen drugs before we walked up there.
Yep, sharp.
Exactly. I mean, it was Trump. I mean, they did everything to Trump. Forget they tried to mess with the mic. They tried. They tried to do all kinds of things to make it difficult for Trump to be in the debate.
They stacked the crowd from the Republican debates on. I mean, they booed. America's cheering. The crowd is booing. I mean, it was and then it was from the jump with him, Robert. The raise your hand thing, and actually, I mean, I think they pushed people to him doing that. I really do.
Plus, he was so good. Like Scott Adams said, he jumped out of his seat the very first question in the very first debate. Megyn Kelly came ready to make her career by destroying Donald Trump.
Right.
And instead, he destroyed her career. But that brilliant, but he understands visual thought. So he's like, look at all these terrible things you about women. He's only Rosie O'Donnell.
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
Everybody breaks out laughing. And it was like, wow, this guy's at a different level. And like in Florida, when South Carolina did, they're all booing him when they stacked him with lobbyists, like they did to Bernie. But Bernie didn't know how to react, of course, because Bernie's a wolf by nature. He's the weakest Marxist I've ever seen.
He is not a champion.
He's the guy of the revolution who gets guillotined the very first day they're in prison. That's Bernie. He's Lenin with spine. So But you when to Trump was like, oh, I hear all that obvious lobby, that's all George, that's all Bush's money.
He nailed it.
He's all of them, he's hacking them, and all of a sudden it rallied. The other thing I was curious about, which because of the pandemic lockdown has created, I was like, how does Trump get to run as outsider and underdog all over again in 2020 as a incumbent? And yet now he's there. He's an outsider again, and he's an underdog again, and that's where Trump is at his best. When they're much better off continuing the fake polls from February and saying, hey, and March particularly, hey Trump, you're doing great. Keep your current team. Keep things closed up. Keep just coasting along. You're just. If they were really wanting to set him up, that would have been the way to do it. Not stick Biden in there. Get a guy like the Montana governor, not Cuomo. A guy like the Montana governor in there, and then he would have slow played it, and then they could have actually beat him by making him afraid, making him feel he's behind. He will be twice as aggressive, twice as sensitive. But hopefully he gets somebody pops in his crew. His polling people are terrible.
Thank you.
It's sad. I tell people, other than you and a very few other people, there's very few pollsters I would recommend out there. In fact, I tell people, I said, if you're going to go with that pollster, just don't go with a pollster at all.
Robert,
in the radio ads.
I have been, and this is not going to earn me brownie points. That's for sure. I have been on the opposite side in a primary with said pollster, and I knew both of our candidates were going to lose. And he is not only blowing up the candidate, telling his candidate she's going to win come November. I mean, not only that she was going to win the primary, but come November she was going to win. And I'm not, I'll just say it right now. So I tell Mark from Politico, right? Mark Caputo covers Florida races, and I'm like, Mark, do me a favor. Take this, and I give him the poll. I talked to my candidate about it. I said, because they were trying to smear, they were trying to give the impression, one, that she's the only one who can win, and the other one's not like a serious candidate. So I said, don't fight back. Let me just go to Mark at Politico, because in the end, this will hurt more. So I'm just going to give Mark our polling data. I'll show him. Let me show him. Let me give it to him so he could see it. Both of them, Robert, were losing to the Democrat. They were both losing. Neither one of them were going to win. And he puts up, we're ahead by 6. Mine shows the exact opposite. She was down by 6, and mine was down by 4 because she had higher name recognition. She had like a very family name, it was like a celebrity name. So, that's good. Unfortunately, it's a sad commentary on our electorate, but it's true. It's good for a little bit, a few points. And in fact, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, the primary happens. Our side lost, but she goes on to lose by 6 points. So, yeah. But she was they were gassing her. Is my point. And what I worry about with Trump is you have to be somebody who's willing to tell the candidate that, look, we got a problem here. You need to change course. You need to do something here. Otherwise, you're going to lose. And if you're not capable of doing that, you're doing your candidate a disservice. And I know of other examples where that particular pollster has done this. And not across the pond, too. Across the pond. This is just what it is.
One of my first congressional campaigns was involved with 1994, when I used to do political consulting. And our pollster, which we paid a lot of money for, was all the way through. And part of it was a big reason was they liked the professional class candidate in the race. But the professional class candidate in the race was named Ron Lurie, and this was Chattanooga, East Tennessee. I kept telling people, folks ain't vote for somebody whose name they can't pronunciate. I was like, but it's Tennessee. They ain't vote. I was like, the guy we have to be worried about is this little guy with only one eye functioned, named Randy Beaton, who ran around even giving people buttons so they could remember his name. Well, guess what happened election night? We spent tons of money beating up this other corporate lawyer in Chattanooga. There was 2 Chattanooga-based candidates and an Oak Ridge candidate, a rural candidate, and the district was basically a third each. Well, we'd spent tons of time worrying about the Oakberry guy because of the poll, and they ignored my advice.
Slip through.
He was never even competitive. He'd even done because he's native Indian. He looks dark. his political people. This is your classic political people. They put a darker background behind him because they're afraid people would think he was black. He would have actually been they perceived that, but that's how they thought of East Tennessee. They didn't realize the name was a problem. What they should have was have fun with the name, come up with a joke, come up with a meme.
Joke. Yeah, shorten it or something.
Some combination. So East Tennessee. So East Tennesseans feel that you relate them. You're not just someone from India who came here and suddenly wants to be the congressman. You're somebody who can relate to them, treats them with respect, like Randy Button did. Randy Button spent the least money by far, all the other four candidates. On an election night, there's a buddy of mine who's now a federal judge in Tennessee, who was sitting there talking, and we ran out of beer. And I heard him saying, if we run out of beer, watch, we're running out of votes. And we ran out of votes now after as Randy Button surged and got to November 1st. And it was all because the polling was bad, because they could forecast someone they didn't like as a pollster doing well. And there's so much of that polling. That's half the equation. The other half the equation is you got tons of grifters, people who need to be right to keep getting paid.
Big time.
Tell people want to hear and play ball with the big insiders and the best. Then they can continue to get good gigs. No, they're bloody infinite. And what's unfortunate with Trump is, while Trump ran an operation that it was easy for him to rely on his own instincts with doing rallies every day. He's out with his audience and his base every day than it is inside the White House. He still had a bunch of people around him that had sort of working class populist instincts of different types. He now has none of those people. Instead, there was a post. There was an autopsy after 2016. Kushner tried to convince everybody that he's the one who won the election. Well, I can say on election night, while I was betting every penny, nickel, dime, and dollar I had, while media friends of mine were writing, get out of the markets, you're dead.
You're finished.
Kushner was telling Trump, by the people that were there, by the way, you're dead, you're going to lose your game.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That absolutely.
The illusion that had anything to do with the success, and as I always say, there's two true truths of Sally Yates is always corrupt. That's what I say that no matter what. Sally Yates is still corrupt. But the other one is, and the second one is what changes. But the second one is Jared Kushner's dad is still one of the dumbest criminal in the history of criminal law. So it gives an idea as to who Kushner is. And Trump's got all these people around him that have no populist instincts at all. They push back on him whenever you could tell he's agitated that Pence cut up that hard deal with Portland. Because he realized, hey, if I'm in the next six months between U.S. Marshals and federal law enforcement, a bunch of crazy rioters trying to burn some stuff down tonight, I'm in that political battle, no matter how the press tries to trade it. Pence goes in and cuts a deal that has that's out right away, and you could tell Trump's agitation at it. The problem is and nobody around him had any political clue at all.
They also told him that Paul Ryan was trustworthy with the omnibus deal. That was, look, you wonder what frames elections, but that omnibus signing without getting a vote on the wall before, I mean, Republicans had control of everything for 2 years. While, of course, there was the Mueller probe, they didn't address a single thing that would have secured their electoral chances in the future. They didn't address immigration, which they're not just because of demographic changes, but because that's what won him the Rust Belt, that and trade. He did do that. I'll give him that. But nothing on trade.
Within his
immigration.
Trump has done everything he can. The problem is side ever been with him. And then in terms of, I had a big communication. It was all the White House, every level of the cabinet press people at a big party in D.C. about a year ago. And I was there, Cernovich and some other people. And first of all, it looked like a Michael J. Fox 1980s convention. I was like, these idiots are I was like, "You're be kidding me! This is a joke." I mean, it's like it's your Ben Shapiro types without any of the upside of Ben Shapiro. So take as Ben Shapiro cultural commentary that's really made him popular among some conservatives on college campuses. Take it away and get all the rest of Ben Shapiro. That's what these people are. They're your frat boy. They're stereotype of your prep school conservative. And I'm sitting there with Cernovich, and almost none of them knew who Cernovich was. Hold on a second. You people are in the press world. You're in the media world, and you don't know about probably one of the top 10 influencers for Trump in 2016 from the independent side political equation. It's like, you guys are a joke. I was like this is no wonder Trump can't control any messaging. It's not just that the media is so opposed to him. It's because he's got nobody fighting back with any and that would explain why he's to this day never used scope. It's like, why not? Why didn't start around the press constantly?
Those were also all the people, Robert, who sat and did nothing. Well, I mean, Alex, whatever you think of Alex Jones, he was the what's the word? The trial run. You know, I mean, and they sat there and did nothing because
he was a guy who never endorsed anybody for. If you look at just take the corporation owned polls, YouGov's own polls. Their polls have 30 million Americans saying they have a very favorable view of Alex Jones. So it gives you an idea of the scope. Well, 10 million very favorable, 30 million favorable. And he has 3 million hardcore fans. Those are 3 million people that vote when he asks them to, when he decides to. It never had it until Trump. And so one, you can take out this critical independent voice. So what stands out about Alex Jones in the last 6 months? Who's the number one conservative news voice telling Trump not to lock down?
Yeah.
It's been Alex Jones. And almost every rally, half of those rallies were organized by Alex Jones supporters anywhere in the country opposed to the lockdown. And what you saw when Jones was talking about it, a month later, it's showing up in polls of yours and others where Trump's base is starting to erode. Their enthusiasm is starting to erode because of the economy. And because all the lockdown logic is all left. There's no way. That was my argument with Will Chamberlain and others. I was like, there's no way. Trump cannot stay in the lockdown world or pandemic world. That's always going to be a left world.
It's a loser. It's a loser. If he doesn't get over COVID, it's a for sure loser. If he doesn't get over this COVID hump, then he can't address the economy. It's all downhill from there. And right. I put up, and people are asking, what do you have on the screen so long, right? That is, you just said it, that question, or really it was 2 questions about vote history. The only thing harder to get people like that to the polls is to get them to the polls twice. All right. That is the only thing harder. And if you look at those enthusiasm numbers, it got stronger as the election went on. And that really is it was strong the entire way until COVID hit. Now I'm going back, and you can go back to here's mid-October, extremely. And this is, that's Clinton, extremely. It's 2-1, almost 2-1 already. It starts to get there, but the media likes to kind of blend these together, folks. Extremely and very, we separate them out because it does matter.
It matters.
It matters big time. It does. And over time, then the leaderboard is always the first one. That's why it shifts from time to time. By the time the election rolled around, he started approaching 80 combined. And then that last one, look at that. I mean, damn near 90. We round. So, I'm sure it was rounded up, but that is the first time for Trump that we've seen some shake, and that was the lockdown. And in the meantime, the media is putting out polls saying Trump's at the highest approval level he's ever been. I'm like, this is it's the Twilight Zone. What are you talking about? This is the complete opposite. But, like I said, they're turning me into a real cynic. And somebody should have been around. And you said it too before, I'm not saying it's got to be a Bannon. It's just a Bannon-like kind of figure who understands and is connected to that economic nationalism that won him the election. And the longer he's separated from that, Robert, all he has to rely on to hear his supporter is Twitter.
Exactly. Successful Republicans, you look at people like Nixon had both Kevin Phillips and had Roger Stone, Pat Buchanan, and a book I recommend that everybody. I use it as a Bible because even though you might think of it as a book contextual 1968, it was as a script for the Nixon campaign in 1966. 1967. In fact, a history of American presidential political voting trends by cultural constituency all the way back to 1968. And that's Kevin Phillips' Emerging Republican Majority.
Yeah.
It's one of the giveaways to me that none of these data analysts were serious is that Morris, Nate Cohn, Nate Silver, Harrion, none of these guys ever even talked about knowing what the book is. And it's if you're going to be serious, never referenced it at all time in all of their political writing. I'm like, you can't serious political data analyst, voting analyst, polling analyst without studying, with at least having knowledge of this book, given it's probably the best political voting analysis ever written in American history.
They believe in blue walls. They don't believe in the one that argued the red, but they believe in blue. And that's why I don't really subscribe to the wall theory. I don't, because walls change, man. Walls they break, like political coalitions.
A genius of Trump was Republicans had locked their base as he says evangelical base.
That's
and
it.
The problem is evangelicals are underrepresented in the electoral college.
Yep.
His genius was, I'm going to appeal, but I don't think he would say today he thought it through, but instincts with Trump. He thought of the people he grew up with, the people he went to, that his dad dropped him off with when he was a teenager on the construction camps. And what were those? Working class ethnic New Yorkers. And so he was like, I know that voter group. That's who we need to appeal to. That's what I'm going to appeal to. And like people forget, like he ran above, he did better than Romney in Connecticut, more so than he did in Arkansas. That's because, of all people forget, Connecticut's dominated by a professional class group. It's all got a huge class ethnic base. Same with Rhode Island, same with parts of Western Massachusetts and the border. I agree with you that New Hampshire is going to be more competitive than people think.
Yeah,
because the whole North Catholic working class thinks as a group is the kind of thing that Phillips documents well. But the advantage is white working class voters are overrepresented in the electoral college. That's why he's got such an electoral. That's why all the lock stuff never made sense. And the other thing they forgot was Barack Obama's base. Like you're talking about keeping enthusiasm among Chase. His problem in 2012 was the black vote was even more enthusiastic. But the youth vote had completely didn't believe in even Obama anymore. Yep. And now all of a sudden his 8-point lead shrunk to between 0 and 4, depending on how well he did with the turnout. And he had, of course, the media run cover, so Ghazi's scandal became a scandal.
Like crazy, because that could have been, and Romney, this is where it comes down to maybe the only shot he ever had, and he was a coward. There's no better way to put it.
It's what happens when I keep telling people if Trump's really in trouble. That a friend of mine, hey, my brother, and he was talking about different analysis and people really being worried about COVID and so forth. And I said, well, if it's the case that Trump is really in trouble, you'll know because does the place Biden. As long as Biden there, he will make a Romney type, Kerry type, Dole type, Mondale type miscue along the way politically, because that's hard. They're politicians. They have no sense of principle. You need people that come across as either passionate or principled if you're going to be president. Almost everybody, they either say person really cares about people like me, or they say that was a really strong person with strong views. Every successful president. It's when they didn't think that about Carter. The other factor I tell from a political betting perspective with Trump is there's no historical precedent for Trump. We've never had someone who is completely out of the political process get elected president.
Right.
Eisenhower and Washington, at least, were both, and Jackson are all generals, either a general or a governor or a senator or vice president. We've never had someone, maybe other than Carter in the modern era, challenge deep state policies constantly in foreign policy. Constantly say, no, I don't want to double down in Syria. I want to get out of Afghanistan. I don't want to create a nuclear. I don't want to create an undue conflict with a nuclear power in Russia. I don't want to militarize when we don't have to. I want certain kinds of solutions with China, not the kind you guys are talking about. Only Carter really pushed back, and of course Carter lost, and the CIA kind of helped with that. That turns out with rain a lot of places. Some of those guys he fired didn't like being fired. So I don't think it'll be bad with Trump, though they've constantly waged war against him. I think that's why he has the timing of Durham and Barr. He wants there to be a pushback, and maybe they say he doesn't even want prosecutions to really occur. Maybe that he wants a threat of the possibility of those prosecutions if they tamper
keep everything at bay, right? To keep everything at bay for now, so it could be at least level, and he's not continuously plagued with this stuff. Yeah, I agree with that, and this kind of stuff is really not my. I get asked these questions, Robert, but it's really not my forte. I know get the stories we get because when you're in the business as long as we've been, people talk to you, and that's how, but it's really not my forte. If I was a gambling man, I would say that that's not really their job right now. I'm not saying people won't pay the price. I'm simply saying that it's not their job. He needed something to stop the constant assault from the IC, the constant assault. And, Democrats obviously are trying to hedge against that. That's what that meeting, that hearing was about the other day. That had absolutely nothing to do with the protest. They were using issues of the black community to run shelter for themselves. And they figured, we got to smear this guy because God forbid there is an October surprise that kills Biden. Biden's been wrapped up in this thing a lot more than anybody, ever thought, including myself. Obama, we already heard a bunch of that. Ben Rhodes had a strategy with that dossier, and they expected Hillary to win. So Ben Rhodes had a strategy. They were going to use that to smear. It's been multi-purpose, but Biden's role in this, Robert, is a little bit, more. It's more than anybody expected. A little bit surprising.
Well, and especially, I think, given his talk about Susan Rice as VP.
That's right. Yeah.
Nick, she is swimming in it. So I've been telling people that I'm skeptical that the Justice Department ever cleaning up its own in general. I said I think Durham will have success. They merely preclude the deep state from trying to undermine the election in 2020, and whatever you want to call it. So the the establishment media types these days argue with you with deep state. It's funny because that was a left term. All those was the idea of the dual state, which was in the late 1800s, the writer for the Economist, the publisher when the Economist was first started as a UK publication, was trying to figure out. He's like, how is you can have an election and the government not really change in whole areas of policy. He came up with the idea of the dual state, because really there's this administrative state that's independent elections and such free elections, and it's gaining power in the industrialized world. And it was, in fact, a lot of people who escaped fascism, German political scientists, expended upon that, and they were trying to explain the rise of fascism, and then they attributed it to the power of the dual state, get involved in the national security apparatus, getting involved in policing apparatus, getting involved in the military. And then what happened was a lefty combined both. Like, well, how do you describe a dual state? When the dual state is the CIA, the NSA, the Director of National Intelligence, the counterintelligence units at the FBI, in the late 60s, and he said, really, it's a deep state. It's really a term. Like a dual state, but that's deeper entrenched because they're real tools of power. To where you have a guy like J. Edgar Hoover is sort of the ultimate symbolic example of that. Nobody wants that he FBI director, but no one will remove from being FBI director. And when Nixon simply didn't place Hoover with one of his proteges, that protege became deep throat and actually got him impeached. And which people know, I had a debate actually with Ben Bradley back when he was still alive. I was like, the real reason you and Bob Woodward hid who Deep Throat was, this was before it was known, is because if we knew who Deep Throat was, we would have second thoughts about your reporting.
Sure. Yeah, what's the ulterior motive here? Of course, yeah. And, with Nixon, the media loves to compare Trump with Nixon, you and I have spoken about this before. There is some valid comparison, but it's just not what they talk about.
It's cultural context.
It's this yeah.
Well, reading Pat Buchanan's about working in the administration, their aspect, like Nixon was obsessed with media, put the wrong people around him, often listen to some of his best populist advisors. So sometimes does do all those things. Well, very different than Nick. He's outside political process entirely. He's a product of our new celebrity TV era. There are things of him that are totally different and distinct, and much more popular than Nixon ever was.
And just to answer the question, because I keep getting the same repeated question, and we are way over. I'm going to wrap it in like a minute, all right? But and then I want to tell people what our plan is before we do, though. Okay, this way, I really think this is the only way forward, Robert. I really do. I just think to get around everything Robert and I have just been discussing for the last 2 hours You have to do it, folks. You have to do it. You have to push it. You got to support it. There's just no other way. If you continue to let big money pay for this stuff, nobody is accountable in that industry anymore. The only thing you could do to be wrong is to give them the results that they don't want, but I'll get into that. People keep asking, because of the political gambling, if you think Trump's going to win. He just said, folks, one of the first things he said, obviously, but I'll let you do it. Go ahead. But it was one of the first things he said.
I see there's two different things when you're placing a political bet. If you're able to place a bet in the political betting markets, those are live markets that you can trade in and out of. That's the best market, and that's Betfair. There's some other markets you have some access to. There used to be something called InTrade, which was great.
Yeah.
It's no longer available. But then I always look at betting not as a matter of who I think is going to win at a given time, but who I think stock is going to go up or down between now and election day, because I could make money on it just shorting or buying the stock, if you will. So the first question I always have, if that's where I'm betting, that's what I look at. I would say that right now Trump will definitely be higher than 30, 35 to 40. In fact, that may be happening sooner rather than later. So what my advice to people currently is buy Trump. It's still been buy Trump a month, and it's going to stay by Trump.
That's good for him.
Unless he goes over 70, and I don't think he will ever go that high.
He can't. He couldn't. He just couldn't. There's too many forces working against him.
And if you're to just place a bet, you can't trade. You're going to lose. And the question becomes timing. So it becomes a new of, if I bet today, am I getting the best value, or is it more likely you can get better value later, or less likely I'll get better value later? I would say right now, I don't think Trump. I had planned on waiting to talk to the Democratic convention,
but now
because I thought, but we're not having a convention, so that changes things. Also, so there's already signs of Trump rebounding in the polls. And so I think he'll back up. So I recommend people bet him now that he's at 35%. My view is should be at 75. So I would normally put him at 95, except for the pandemic.
So much unprecedented stuff.
It's unprecedented things we can't. I put a value on, but are new risks that his predecessors did not face.
And the incumbent got the benefit of the second convention, and it's just all that's gone now. And they wanted this too, of course. This was like this quasi-election. They want to run. They want to count the votes for a month. This is what they want to do, and they don't want Trump rallying. If he rallies, he will Biden.
Trump people feeling more enthusiasm by getting together.
Absolutely,
couple things: boost enthusiasm, and they let Trump know his base really think.
Yeah.
So he figures out, because he tests things. He'll do A/B testing with
he'll throw it out
all the time, and he gets much better. Like the whole swamp thing was something that Bannon told him, but he started testing it, and he saw a huge response, and all of a sudden it became a part of his core speech. It had never appeared during the primaries. I think speech in Florida was the first time I heard him give the language.
We tested that.
This September, I think it was.
We tested that after he went to Gettysburg, and it was like such a big thing. I'm like, wow, listen to the crowd go over this. And we tested it with the polling. It was through the roof. It really was. And then that's when we started. It was. And he's got to, like you said, it's a different election. He is now the president. Things change, but he's got to at least invoke that. Like, I'm still trying. The boat is rocking, which people don't like. They don't like boat rocking. But if you want to do what you elected to do,
he needs Durham Barr to keep, I say, but he needs to bring one or two prosecutors that make it look like he's clearing out the swamp.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, because everything has to be shown as, look, it's rocking because I'm doing what you elected me to do. If it wasn't rocking, then I sold you out, and that's it, kind of
the other thing I recommend he do is if federal courts are not going to exonerate Flynn,
right,
he go ahead and pardon him early.
Right now.
And reason to do so, bring Flynn on the campaign trail with him. Say, you see the problems with the swamp. Look at what they did to him. I pardoned him, and I'm bringing him back to the White House to clear things up. That kind of message, that this symbolic, personal, visceral messaging, he needs to get back to. He needs to repeat. And they did a brilliant job with how they come up in Oklahoma. I mean, having bogus number of people submit it, so a bunch of people didn't show up. Bunch of people were kept out. Buying into nonsense. Like, he should just start pushing back aggressively on anything related to COVID. Say, look, at this does not present a risk greater than the flu for most people. So we need to get back to being Americans. We don't let Chinese viruses kill us. We don't let Chinese viruses kill American freedom, American liberty, or American democracy. And if you want to have Andrew Cuomo's response to the highest death rate in the entire world, you go ahead. And what Joe Biden will give you. But what I'm going to give you is going back to being America and Americana. And you need to start to embrace that and quit trying to play the halfway game, because that's just a net loss.
That suburban woman you were talking about, who's a mother, lives in a $500,000 home. One word, folks. One word. Schools.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no doubt about it. Oh, school vote.
It's hard.
And especially right now, people are still under such a delusion of fear, of hysteria about COVID. They think things are not true. I have friends of mine that this, and like they'll say something. I'm like, you do realize for people under 25 that the flu is more dangerous, and they've never
heard that.
I'm shocked at how extreme the echo chamber's been. So he's got to push back against it, but he's got to bring some sort of populist people inside. You go back to Nixon. Nixon had Roger Stone, Cat Phillips, Pat Buchanan. You look at Reagan, the young Lee Atwater. Carter, actually, when he came in 76, he had the great populist pollster, one of his key people all the way through. Poppy Bush was a whole different guy with Lee Atwater in 1988.
He had him, right. He had the same.
And when Lee Atwater was dead in 1992. Of course, Clyde Carville and Begala. And now, after that, we don't have as many. WB really didn't have any. Obama's people were Chicago people, Axel. They're really deep populist types, and that's almost why. I mean, honestly, he underperformed in 2008.
Yeah, absolutely.
He could. You have the whole media coordinating you as literally Jesus on earth.
Barely Indiana.
Number one, you have the incumbent that has the lowest rings in the history of the presidency, with a war scandal, a popular war, a scandal related to the war, and an economic crash.
Economic collapse.
And an pop scandal connected to that crash.
Yeah.
Crash 1932 plus Vietnam 1968. It's like, how do you not win by double digits?
Right.
Over McCain, the only thing kept McCain up, contrary to popular opinion, was Palin. If he hadn't Palin on it, he would have lost by double digits.
And they should have they should have the character at this point, Robert, to admit that. He only got back in the game because of her. That's it. The base really didn't like him. It was a split opinion, and then basically he killed himself. I mean, the I'll never forget. The economy is in collapse. He says the economy is not my strong suit. I mean, just the dumbest possible.
Yeah, perfect opportunity, because even though he was kidding, if we put all that beside perception, McCain was the independent guy. And that was a perfect opportunity for him to say, we're not going to give much money to Wall Street, while Obama was going to sign off on it. That would really have changed Obama's change image. So perfect opportunity. But none of it. He had Steve Schmidt. He had, I mean, Nicole Wallace, the lefty on MSNBC, was running his campaign. In fact, was in charge of helping being silent. So that shows you they're scheme artists. They're the top, all grifters. They'd all be in jail in a real world. They're real world. They're dead for their incompetence. They're in the mob would have whacked them all just because they're too dumb to hold job. But that's what political class is. And now Trump is surrounding himself with people he used to mock his whole life. So that's my only criticism of Trump. I was like, have one or two generals who know who you are, who can amplify your message, who can feed ideas to you that can make you more effective, rather than all these yuppie mucks that are just completely clueless. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm still betting on Trump because all the historic tricks favor Trump. Northup, the political science professor at Stony Brook, his model 2025 and 27 presidential elections, he says 91% chance. Yes.
Yep.
So Now Lichtman's some other crazy numbers, but Lichtman's gone off the reservation ever since everybody in the academy hates Trump. He won't admit his own metrics if objectively applied, but would say also reelect. So I do like for everybody out there the unlikely to change. I told people to set Trump when he was at, I think, 55, back when he went along with the lockdown in March.
Yeah.
And I was right because he's down 35.
I saw that.
I'm back by Trump. People were mad at me at the time, and I even got a debate with Larry on it the other day on Twitter. I get all the Trump enthusiasts. That's probably why he's going to win, and that enthusiasm. But from an objective standpoint, he is in trouble in key places because of what happened with the lockdown, that he has to get that voter back. That was him just a few months ago.
He had him. That's right. He had
like a big problem with the polls. They're not answering some of those polls. They're not responding to them, and it's because they're settling down. It's not because they're all excited to vote.
No, they just don't want to talk because they're right. It's like I always told people after the 2012 the first presidential debate, it was not that those Democrats were all of a sudden not going to show up again. They didn't want to talk to pollsters because Obama's performance was so bad. That is typical response bias. And I think I understand, like you said, the enthusiasm, but from, again, an objective standpoint, if you understand what drove or fueled Donald Trump's victory, how bad it looked to those voters that just a few months ago he had, no longer has, needs to get them back, how bad it looked to them for him to do something like a lockdown, an ahistorical economic lockdown that directly hurt them, while listening to the elites and experts that he made fun of and mocked and hammered throughout 2016. So 15 and 16. So he ran against the Dr. Fauci's of the world.
Absolutely.
Against the people that are surrounding him right now and telling him what to do. Now I know he's his own man. He made a critical error. It was and he had no historical evidence. Forget about evidence. He didn't even have a historical event, Robert, that he could point to and say, oh, well, this, happened in ancient Egypt. It never happened. Nobody has ever shut down commerce for a virus.
Our economy went up during the Spanish flu. GDP grew. It didn't go down.
That's right.
I warned about 2017 when Bannon was out. I said, Bannon's out. I'm going to bet on Trump for the near short term. Not because Bannon's the wall save all, but because he needed somebody because Bannon would only Bannon in the room. He needed Bannon also was much clued in 2016 because he'd been Breitbart for 5 years on the front lines of populist news. Once he was away from Breitbart, he's paid whatever his connections are. He's much more focused on China. Let's put it that way. And he didn't have anywhere near the same political acumen. But there's plenty of people out there who do. And Trump not reaching out to those people is a major mistake. And it showed up when the fact that someone like Alex Jones's message was no longer getting to him with regularity, did when he had social media access, led to not realizing what a mistake it was. And I think now he realizes it. I tell you, like the Will Chamberlains and others are still on the side that lockdown was the right idea. I say, look, if you really believe that, he would be for it again. He would consider it again. He keeps saying, there's no chance I'm ever locking down again. And he recognized he screwed up. He may not say so publicly because Trump's just not one of those, oh, yeah, I screwed it up yesterday kind of guys. But he'll tell you implicitly by saying, I'm never doing that. And I'm not saying it was a mistake. I'm just saying, by God, I'll never do it again. I think he gets the message. He started to ignore Fauci, which is good. Starting to ignore Burns, which is good. He says he's getting positive Twitter feedback when he criticizes Fauci or criticizes Burks. So he's starting to pick up more and more of that. And so I think that's good. But we'll see how it all works out in the end. I think. But yeah, I still favor Trump. I know I can't get to the A because it's banned. But I plan on getting to the A by fall. I'm hoping he's still 40% less in the betting markets, and plan on betting a very, very large amount.
The opportunity, yeah, and make the most of the opportunity is what
there's honest polling and the utility to the idea you had of doing the targeted polling of the northern working class in particular, who vote alike across all those key swing states from Minnesota to Maine, is that is to get an accurate, honest target poll of someone who knows what they're doing. And the utility that you have is that you have the highest success rate of any pollster at area over the past half decade. And so that combination, I think crowding is a good. If people are sincere that they really want to know honest, and I think the other utility is not only for the people who want for themselves, but by helping crowdfund it. And I'll make a potential contribution to have it happen. To take the crowdfund take off, the goal is to be able to have crowdfunding be consistent as an option and alternative. So for that, you want diversity. When you have to rely on one or two monetary sources as being affected by that person's whatever their interest. Whereas if you have a broad base, you all about is accurate data, accurate forecasting, accurate information. And we're going to use Richard's poll data, and I'll add some analytical, historical analysis to it, so that we'll have the best political forecast out there that's live and in time. And the goal is use all the methods and modes of data gathering and poll collection, whether texting, cell phones, landlines, IVR, online, whatever works best. Maybe an online line. We'll see which is the most efficient. But I think people should participate in it. I think it's a great idea because it'll be only honest investigation, not only for people to have for themselves and participate in, but for that information to be shared. Because there's going to, once people start realizing this is the best data, then you're going to congressional candidates make better choices, Senate candidate better choices. And what I mean by better choices is recognize the Trumpist populist agenda is what's popular. And a certain Trumpist populist agenda is when get them elected. And if there's some counter information in there, that should be disclosed too to deal with it accordingly. I mean, there's things like, for example, I think Trump is probably right to even though economically it's bad economics to go along with the unemployment compensation being in excess of what you could get paid for. Trump is probably smart when he's trying to play both sides. He's like, I want the extra $600 for you. Trump's probably, even though I'm a big fan of impairing contractual relationships by federal government approach, he's probably right to look at try to do something about elections. Because this is a problem the government's created. This is mass takings. This is what a bunch of people, and now I think they should compensate landlords because landlords are usually paying mortgages.
It's not their fault.
Exactly. If you allow what Trump to do is to say nobody has to pay their mortgage. Do a mortgage forbearance. Beyond that, legally, that's beyond. Make the banks feel a little bit of pain because the banks have been pushing a lot of this lockdown politics because the Fed has been just funding massive cash to them. Make the banks pay. But choose a couple ways where you can be on the economic pop side of the equation.
Yeah, nobody would feel bad for the banks, Robert. And for people who didn't...
I always tell people, if someone comes to me and says, I have a possible lawsuit against a bank, I say, I'll get that for free. But no problem.
Take it.
If I need to sue a bank, if I have any chance to beat them, then I'll sue them. I hate banks.
And just to recap what Robert was saying, and before we get out of here, don't forget to follow Robert on Twitter if you don't already, at Barnes_law. All right. And mine's right up there too, but Barnes Law right there, Barnes_law. But what we don't want to see happen is it run out, so it needs to be continuous. You guys, you can't trust, you have to get these guys working for you. So that's what we're trying to do here, and it will be done.
Honest polling information to the people to the politicians, so that they will make better decisions that are consistent with the values that we all care about.
That's exactly right. I couldn't have put it better myself. I'll put a button in it right there. And get us, don't forget to like the page because that'll be key. You'll be able to see what's going in the pot right there. All right. And we'll do it at, we're not going to do it like a media company charges like Robert was just saying. That time is over, so make somebody accountable to you. And don't forget to share, like the page and share it because we got to I think we're close. We're really close. We're almost there, folks. And we got to build that fan base. All right. And then, of course, don't forget to mosey on over to Facebook, like it, all of that good stuff. But we'll be back next Wednesday. We'll give you the update. We'll do another 2 hours. We'll give you an update and let you know what's going on. And hopefully we can get this going soon because time is a-running. Time is a-wasted, right? That's how they put it. But exactly. That's it.
The goal is to be able to raise the money to publishing after Labor Day to start
right.
To it for everybody out there. So you the audience will decide what happens and doesn't happen. If you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. We'll make it happen.
All right, and it will be in the most transparent way possible. I have a vision, where we were talking about Nate before. I like what he's trying to do, but I'd really like to know, where did you gather that from? What data source that?
2 steps further, and partially he's not a pollster, so he has limitations still.
He's relying on other people. Yeah,
exactly. Secondly, he is he's got a bias. So when it shows information, like for example, if he's information he doesn't like he didn't like USC polling Trump ahead in 2016, he went to a massive detail research and identified how they had that issue with the African American portion of their voter poll. It didn't take more than 10 minutes to Nate and figure out Nate Cohn had a huge problem. And he's not talking about when he's saying, by the way, there's going to be 25% new voters and all going to be Democrats. Okay, that's never happened in American political history. So I don't know why you think that. I'm not even sure he's fully aware of it, though, there in his polling day. So there's a limit to, we can take the transparency to the level that Pew does, and also don't have the same left-leaning political bias that gives some counterbalance, but we want to be right. So that the goal to be accurate, to forecast correctly all the way through, not just forecast correctly by throwing a dart at the board 3 days before the election, but by it right throughout September and October and on election day. And give people honest information so they make good decisions. Because as we've seen with COVID, when they have bad information, they make bad decisions.
That's right. I'll end it there because that's it, Robert. You nailed it. All right, folks. See you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for following. Thanks for watching. Follow along the entire time. Again, follow Robert on Twitter if you don't already, at Barnes_law. Have a safe and happy week. Do your thing. Keep your chin up, and we'll talk back next week. All the best, Rob. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you next week.
Banana.